Chapter 575. Fortunately, these people were lucky and were not seriously injured. They fell to the ground and vomited blood, but they were not seriously injured. We can only climb up. Situmuyang was still scared. Fortunately, he did not rush up first. He looked at the majestic mountain peak in front of him. There were no stone steps or paths. Yunling Feng happened to appear nearby. He looked at Su Yi indifferently. Seeing that Su Yi had escaped, he seemed a little disappointed. He took the opportunity to overtake Su Yi. Su Yi narrowed his eyes and looked at the peak of the mountain. He continued to climb up, but he had to be more careful. Bang! Not far away, Mu Yao also encountered danger. A skeleton suddenly appeared and attacked her from behind. Boom! Mu Yao's body was shrouded in golden light. Her aura became overbearing and fierce as she fought fiercely. After a few moves, the skeleton did not seem to have any intelligence. It only had the instinct to kill. It fell down. The mountain was very big. The higher they went, the less dangerous it was. Everyone climbed higher and closer to the peak. The battle between the mysterious mummified expert and the strange sword-body skeletons had already reached below the crowd. Whoosh whoosh, a strange sword light suddenly swept down from the peak of the mountain and came down from above. Rumble, from the peak of the mountain, there were many boulders rolling down. Those boulders were more than 1,000 pounds. If they were swept up, they would be smashed into meat paste. Be careful! Everyone jumped left and right. Not only did they have to avoid the strange sword light, but they also had to avoid the boulders rolling down from the top. They were in a sorry state. Fortunately, the sword light and boulders were not particularly dense. Everyone had a chance to reach the peak of the mountain. At the peak of the mountain, the terrain was no longer steep. It gradually became flat. Whoosh whoosh, one figure after another jumped to the peak of the mountain and appeared on the peak. Everyone was very careful. They circulated the primordial qi in their bodies to guard against any sudden danger. On the peak of the mountain, black fog lingered. The surrounding light was dim and the aura was extremely terrifying. Many stone platforms appeared in front of him, each of them about 10 feet in size. Some of the stone platforms had bone fragments scattered on them. These white bones were the same as the skeletons they had encountered before. There were some kind of black spots on them. The stone platforms were densely packed, all the way to the highest point of the mountain peak. Many of the stone platforms had swords inserted into them. The stone platforms were arranged in an orderly manner. The precious swords shone and intertwined with each other. It was as if they were connected together by some kind of formless profound law. Above the treasured sword, there was a faint light that connected with the fluctuating sword qi. Finally, it spread to a stone platform on the highest peak. At this moment, there was an ancient stone platform at the highest peak. It was around 1.5 m in size, square in shape, and it was densely inscribed with unfamiliar talisman markings that flickered with light. There were many crisscrossing swords on the stone platform. In the end, they were all connected to the stone platform. This is the Dark Light Sword. Suddenly, Ryugan River cried out. On the stone platform in front of him, he saw a treasured sword inserted into the stone platform. The sword's body was flickering with mysterious runes and fluctuating with an ancient aura. It was entirely scarlet red like flowing magma. Dark Light Sword, it's really the Dark Light Sword. Gu Chenyu, O Luo, O Yang Ran, and the others also exclaimed. Their eyes were filled with astonishment. Chapter 576. Ouyang Ran whispered to Su Yi. He knew that Su Yi didn't know much about the Xinjian Gate. Green Abyss Blazing Sword, Great Baron Ancient Sword, that's the Fengyang Sword. And the Thunder Dragon Sky Demon Sword. Cries of surprise spread out, and the disciples of the Divine Sword sect almost lost their voices. The swords on the stone platforms were all famous and had left behind many legends. They had followed the ancestors of Xinjian Gate and dominated the world. At this moment, These legendary swords of Xinjiang Gate had appeared in front of their eyes. How could they not be excited? The supreme benefits will belong to the fated ones. Someone spoke. It was Yu Shanhe. He looked at the swords on the stone platforms and suppressed the fire in his eyes. He immediately rushed towards the peak of the mountain. The supreme benefits were left behind by the ancestors of Xinjiang Gate. This was their real goal this time. Yu Shanhe was no exception. He wanted to get it. Boom. Just as Yu Shanhe rushed out and got close to the stone platforms, the entire mountain suddenly trembled. The stone platforms with the swords on them seemed to come to life at the same time and began to emit light. $I initial, buzz buzz. At the same time, the swords on the platforms also trembled and emitted a sonorous sound. Swish swish. Rays of light spread out from the swords and connected in a mysterious trajectory, enveloping the entire mountain peak. On the light shield, there were many faint shadows of sword light. Upon closer inspection, these sword shadows were very similar to the swords on the stone platforms. There seemed to be a mysterious connection between them. They were filled with sharp sword aura. Swish. Just as Yu Shanhe jumped out, he was instantly blocked by the light shield. Sword light swept out from it and turned into a sword tide that covered the sky and earth. Oh no! Yu Shanhe's expression changed. He immediately drew his sword and used all his strength. Swish! A sword light swept out and landed directly on Yu Shanhe's body, leaving wounds on his shoulder and waist. Blood flowed out. Fortunately, Yu Shanhe retreated in time and avoided his vital parts. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. As he retreated, Yu Shanhe's face was as pale as ash. His eyes were still in shock. On the light shield, the sword light disappeared. Are you trying to stop us? Qin Fang's figure jumped out. The supreme benefits left behind by the ancestors of Xinjiang Gate were right in front of him. He didn't want to miss out on this opportunity. Yuan Qi surged as his feet touched the ground. He wanted to rush into the light shield. Swish! As Qin Fang approached, sword light suddenly shot out from within the light barrier. A large amount of sword light swept out, and a swift and fierce explosion erupted. Qin Fang was already mentally prepared, but he was unable to retreat unscathed. He pulled out his sword with all his might, but in the end, he retreated with injuries. His chest and thighs were bleeding from the sword light. Swish! 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 When the crowd saw this, they were originally afraid that others would be the first to arrive. However, at this moment, all of them had no choice but to be cautious. That mysterious light barrier seemed to be preventing them from approaching. Nanlilan, Gongqi, and Gu Qinyu were not convinced and wanted to give it a try. But the result was the same. The three of them were prepared. Even with their full strength, they were still blocked and retreated with injuries. However, the mysterious light shield only stopped them from moving forward. As long as they didn't get close, it wouldn't attack them. Su Yi was looking at the light shield. He didn't dare to try. Even Gu Qinyu wasn't a match for it just now. It was enough to prove how strange the light shield was. Is that so? Suddenly, Sword 11 walked out. His black robe fluttered slightly. His expression was solemn as he slowly walked to the front of the light shield. The sharp sword chi was intimidating, causing everyone in the surroundings to feel fearful and uneasy. Just as the sharp sword light was about to reach him, Sword 11 moved. He swung the sword in his hand and a sword light exploded. It moved in a strange arc towards one of the sword lights. Chi-la-la, a strange scene appeared. There was no sound of metal clashing as everyone expected. Just as the sword light touched, the large expanse of sword light above the light shield shattered inch by inch in front of Sword 11. Swish swish, only a few scattered sword lights flashed out, cutting off a few strands of Sword 11's hair, leaving shallow bloodstains around his ears. But at this moment, a crack appeared on the light shield in front of Sword 11. Sword 11's eyes lit up, and he immediately leaped up and entered the light shield. As Sword 11's figure swept in, the light shield also returned to normal. What happened? Qin Feng, Yushanhe, and the others were dumbfounded. The 11th sword actually went in. Gu Qinyu was even more surprised. In terms of strength, he was stronger than Sword 11 no matter what. But Gu Qinyu was the clearest that even he could not block the sword light that erupted above the light shield, so Sword 11 should not be able to block it. I see, haha. Yun Lingfeng laughed, seeming to have seen through the clues. Qi surged from the soles of his feet, and his figure swept out. Swish swish, the light shield was as usual, and the sword light that erupted swept down. The aura was incomparably terrifying. Yun Lingfeng made his move. With a sword in hand, his expression was solemn, but the corner of his mouth lifted into a confident smile. The sword light in his hand was strange, and it collided with the sword light that erupted above the light shield. Clang clang. There was a sound of metal clashing, but the strange thing was that it was caused by Yun Lingfeng's sword light. The sword light that erupted on the light shield in front of him suddenly collapsed and disappeared, and then cracks appeared. Haha! Yun Lingfeng laughed and leaped in, also entering the light shield. Swish swish, two figures swept out at the same time. One was a beautiful figure filled with golden light, and the other was a tall figure wrapped in lightning. These two people were Mu Yao and Ryugan River. At this moment they seemed to have seen through the clues and went to the light shield. Swish swish, on the light shield, the sword light fluctuated, bringing along a large amount of light, blocking Mu Yao and Ryugan River. At this moment, a sword appeared in the hands of Mu Yao and Ryugan River at the same time. Their expressions were solemn as they went to meet the light shield. Swish swish, the sword light erupted, and the light scattered in all directions. In front of the light shield, cracks appeared. Ryugan River and Mu Yao also rushed into the light shield. What's going on? Why did they all go in? Why can't we go in? Seeing that Yun Lingfeng, Sword 11, Ryugan River, and Mu Yao had already entered, the rest of the people were even more dumbfounded. The supreme benefit was inside the light shield. Chapter 577. What's going on? Situ Muyang was also a little dumbfounded. Su Yi had been staring at the light barrier. When he came back to his senses, his eyes lit up as he said to Situ Muyang, "Perhaps it has something to do with sword principles. This light barrier doesn't test one's strength. It tests one's sword principles." As soon as he finished speaking, Su Yi stepped forward. Yuan Qi fluctuated under his feet, and his figure was like an afterimage as he directly swept towards the light barrier. Swish 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 swish, a large amount of sword light suddenly burst out. The incomparably sharp sword Qi intertwined and swept towards Su Yi from all directions. G5 inside, Su Yi could feel how terrifying this sword Qi was. It was as if it could destroy everything. Situ Muyang's clear eyes lit up at this moment. He narrowed his eyes and stared intently at Su Yi in front of him. Just as the sword light was about to reach Su Yi, the aura on Su Yi's body had already changed. An invisible aura spread out, and two rays of sword light swept out from the depths of his eyes. An otherworldly aura also spread out from his body along with a great pressure. Swish! Under many gazes, Su Yi moved. He shook his arm and used his hand as a sword. A ray of Yuan Qi light condensed into a sword light, and with a sharp sound of wind breaking, it directly swept towards the sword light in front of him. Clang 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 clang. The sword light condensed from Yuan Qi also emitted a violent sound of metal exploding. It brought with it a violent gust of wind that swept out in all directions in an instant. Many gazes immediately became stunned. The sword light on the light barrier shattered inch by inch and turned into nothingness. A crack appeared in front of Su Yi. Swish! Su Yi took the opportunity to enter and also entered the light barrier. Su Yi also went in. Xia Chongqing, Si Shiyuan, and the others' expressions changed before they could see any clues. Several people had already entered, but they still couldn't find any clues. Sword Dao, Situ Muyang pondered and pondered. This is a test of the Sword Dao. Only those who are qualified can enter. Sakura Asaka's eyes glowed and flickered. She seemed to have understood something. Sui immediately sensed a familiar aura enveloping his surroundings. It was so familiar that it could affect his soul. On the surrounding stone platforms, those precious swords shone. They were suffused with an aura and they were invisibly connected. Whoosh whoosh, the gazes of Jianxi, Yunlingfeng, Mu Yao, and Ryugan River, who had entered earlier, did not land on these once famous treasured swords. At this moment, everyone's gazes had landed on the square ancient stone platform at the very front. Voila! Suddenly, the mysterious patterns on the square stone platform fluctuated and trembled slightly. A ray of light appeared in the middle, and a crack appeared. A sword hilt was revealed, and it slowly rose up. It was a treasured sword. The sword's body was as red as blood. It was crystal clear and filled with treasure light. The treasured sword was about 3 feet long. It emitted a brilliant sword light, and many mysterious patterns and symbols lingered around it. Buzz buzz, when this treasured sword appeared, it immediately resounded with wind and thunder. The entire mountain seemed to be trembling. There were huge rocks all around that cracked and rolled down. With a rumbling sound, the scene was incomparably terrifying. Buzz buzz, at the same time, the treasured swords on the surrounding stone platforms all resounded with sword cries. They were sonorous and incessant, bursting with light, as if they were on a pilgrimage. Oh my God, that must be the supreme benefit left behind by the ancestor. That's a divine weapon, left behind by the ancestor. Everyone could clearly see everything that was happening inside the light shield. That scene made their hearts tremble. Inside the light shield, Jianxi, Ryugan River, and the others were even more shocked. The legendary supreme benefit left behind by the ancestor of Xinjian Gate was right in front of them. It was a divine weapon. Jianxi's pitch-black eyes fluctuated with light. He bowed to the divine weapon on the stone platform in the middle, and then his figure rushed out. Humph! Yunling Feng let out a cold snort from his throat, but he did not stop him. Mu Yao and Lu Yunchuan's eyes moved. They were also observing. This place was extremely strange. They felt that the divine weapon would not be so easy to obtain. Soon, Jianxi arrived in front of the divine weapon. Yuan Qi circulated in his body. He stretched out his hand and directly grabbed the divine weapon. Buzz! At this moment, above the square stone platform, a bright and dazzling light suddenly emerged. The light flowed and enveloped the divine weapon. Qi La! Jianxi stretched out his hand and grabbed the light shield, causing it to fluctuate. Boom! A mighty and unparalleled force swept out and fiercely hit Jianxi's body. Puff! Without turning back, Jianxi spat out a large mouthful of blood. His body flew backward like a short-winged bird, smashing into the side of Sui, Ryugan River, and the others. Jianxi struggled a few times before getting up. His eyes were filled with shock and his breath was weak. The hand that just touched the light shield was badly mutilated, and blood flowed out. Everyone was shocked, but fortunately they did not act rashly. The divine weapon is spiritual and will choose its own master. It needs to be communicated, and only those who are fated will know. Ryugan River gritted his teeth, his eyes burning. Such a divine weapon, the supreme benefits left behind by the old ancestor, would allow one to dominate the world unhindered. Who could resist such a temptation? Boom! Lightning fluctuated on his body. Ryugan River wanted to try. He arranged the lightning armor, and his hand was also covered. He appeared in front of the divine weapon, and his hand slowly pushed forward, trying to communicate with it, wanting to obtain it. Boom! An unparalleled mighty force erupted, and countless sword lights poured out at the same time. The speed was too fast, and suddenly attacked. Ryugan River was prepared, but at this moment, he was still directly sent flying. Blood spurted out of his mouth, and the lightning armor on his body became dim. There were many cracks on it, and he fell to the ground. Boom! Just at this moment, a resplendent golden radiance erupted. Mu Yao's beautiful figure pounced out. Monstrous golden radiance swept out from her delicate body. Her body also underwent a strange transformation. Her skin was suffused with a golden luster, and an indescribable tyrannical and fierce aura spread out. In the next instant, a strange golden radiance spread over Mu Yao's body, and the bones in her entire body emitted crackling sounds. Her arms seemed to be expanding, and golden light pervaded the air. On her palms, there was a feather-like golden light overflowing. A terrifying demonic aura spread out, and behind her, it condensed into a huge shadow of a golden-winged rock. Everything was as fast as lightning. Just as Ryugan River's body was sent flying, Mu Yao had already arrived. She completely merged with the shadow of the golden-winged rock behind her, as if she had transformed into a real golden-winged rock. Golden light filled the sky. At this moment, Mu Yao was like a real rock descending. She waved her hand, and layers of visible golden feathers, like sharp scales, whistled and probed into the light shield. Swoosh, swoosh. On the light shield, a sword light flashed and burst out. Clang, clang. Chapter 578. In her panic, Mu Yao wrapped her arms around her body like the wings of a rock. Clang, clang, sparks clashed, and Mu Yao was sent flying. She spat out blood and fell to the ground. When she got up, Mu Yao had returned to her normal appearance. Her hair was disheveled, and her body was covered in wounds and blood. She was in a sorry state. How powerful! I can't take it by force. Su Yi was the clearest about Mu Yao's strength. Yet, she was still severely injured. This made Su Yi speechless. It seemed that the treasure left behind by the Xinjian Gates patriarch was not to be taken by force. The treasure will choose its own owner. The fated one will obtain it. Su Yi pondered. He walked toward the stone platform in front of him, wanting to give it a try. The reason why Su Yi chose to stay in the Divine Sword sect was because of this unparalleled benefit. Now that the benefit was right in front of him, it was no longer just a temptation to Su Yi. Since he was already here, he had to get it. Humph! Seeing Su Yi step forward, Yunling Feng's eyes flashed with coldness. He sneered. He was happy to see this brat severely injured. It would be best if he died. Did he think that this supreme benefit could be obtained so easily? Su Yi stood before the stone platform and looked at the crimson divine weapon on the light screen. His eyes glowed. This was left behind by the Xinjian Gates patriarch. Perhaps it contained the inheritance of the Xinjian Gates patriarch. If he could obtain it, it would be a supreme benefit. I need to communicate with it. The treasure will choose its own owner. I can't take it by force, Su Yi muttered to himself with a solemn expression. A formless soul energy spread out from his mind and approached the light screen. He wanted to connect with the divine weapon and communicate with it. Su Yi was very careful. He didn't dare to be careless. This was soul energy. Once the soul was injured, it would be much more serious than physical injuries. That was also the reason why everyone feared soul tamers. A soul controller's attacks mostly attacked the soul directly, or their martial arts attacks contained soul attack. Once one's soul was injured, no matter how light it would affect one's future cultivation. In the Myriad Sword Conference's final peak confrontation, Yunling Feng had been too confident in his soul attack. However, Yunling Feng still didn't know that Su Yi's soul was even stronger than his physical body. The heavenly origin demon soul was too abnormal, which was why Yunling Feng was defeated so miserably by Su Yi. A wisp of incorporeal soul power slowly approached the light screen. Su Yi was on high alert. The invisible spiritual strength approached the light curtain. However, due to Su Yi's cautiousness, the light curtain did not react. Su Yi's soul force penetrated the light screen and approached the divine weapon on the stone platform. This was only possible after Su Yi had cultivated the heavenly origin demon soul. Otherwise, he would not have been able to release his soul power like this. Buzz. The divine weapon rumbled as Su Yi's soul force came into contact with it, causing it to tremble. On the crimson sword, ancient runes began to fluctuate. Crack! Suddenly, the stone platform trembled as the divine weapon sank back into the stone platform. Not good! Su Yi's eyes darkened. If the divine weapon were to be retracted, all his efforts would be wasted. Instantly, he released his soul energy, and a formless soul energy gushed out, wrapping around the divine weapon. Buzz! The divine weapon rumbled as if it was affected by something. The crimson light became even more resplendent. Its aura surged as if it was trying to break free from the control of Su Yi's soul force. It was not easy for him to connect with the divine weapon. How could Su Yi be willing to give up? His soul force surged and wrapped around the divine weapon. Boom! The divine weapon shone brightly, and a blood-red light burst forth. The invisible, terrifying aura caused the light that enveloped the surroundings to fluctuate continuously, creating violent ripples. Rumble! At this moment, the entire mountain peak was shaking along with it. The earth was quaking and the mountains were shaking. Is Su Yi going to succeed? Could it be that Su Yi has communicated with the divine weapon? Looking at the commotion, everyone was surprised. Ryugan River, Mu Yao, and Jian Shi were also shocked. Yun Lingfeng's eyes were filled with coldness. The coldness in his eyes had turned into astonishment, and his expression immediately changed. Whoosh! Yun Lingfeng was no longer calm as he rushed out. He was afraid that Su Yi had really communicated with the divine weapon. After all, there were too many strange things about this kid. This supreme benefit must not fall into the hands of others. In front of the light screen, Yun Lingfeng gritted his teeth as a small jade bottle appeared in his hand. He crushed the jade bottle in his palm as a drop of blood flowed out and landed on his palm. Boom! This drop of blood burst out with a bright light as if it was going to merge into Yun Lingfeng's palm. The blood light was like the sun as an ancient aura filled the air. Yun Lingfeng stretched out his hand and his palm landed on the light screen. Suddenly, the light screen surged as if there was a tsunami. On the light screen, rays of light burst out as if countless sword lights were shooting out. However, at this moment, from Yun Lingfeng's palm, a blood light filled the sky as if a blood moon had descended. It could spread to everything and gradually climbed onto the light screen. At the same time, the divine weapon on the stone platform seemed to be attracted by something as it vibrated violently. The light screen became more and more dazzling. The divine weapon that was about to retract back to the stone platform rose up again, as if it was trying to break free from the stone platform. Crack, crack, on the quaint stone platform, mysterious and ancient symbols glowed. A vast aura fluctuated as if it was trying to bind the divine weapon. However, in the end, the surroundings began to crack. What's going on? Yun Lingfeng seems to have communicated with the divine weapon too? Yun Lingfeng seems to be a little abnormal. There's something strange about that blood light. Looking at the movement caused by Yun Lingfeng, Gong Qi, Sakura Asaka, O Luo, and the others who were outside the light screen saw it clearly and were shocked. Ryugan River, Sword 11, and Mu Yao who were inside the light screen were even more shocked. Buzz. Soon, the divine weapon rose up and left the quaint stone platform. The sound of the sword was like wind and thunder, and a blood-red light burst out. At this moment, the light screen around the quaint stone platform shattered inch by inch and disappeared. Seeing this, Yun Lingfeng's eyes were filled with joy. Do you think you can get the divine weapon of the ancestor? Looking at Su Yi beside him, Yun Lingfeng shouted coldly. He immediately stepped out and grabbed the divine weapon with his palm that was covered in blood light. Sui had been surprised. His invisible soul power was connected to the divine weapon. He could clearly feel that there was an extremely strange aura on Yun Lingfeng's body at this moment. That blood light was even more strange. It seemed to be able to communicate with the divine weapon. However, the supreme benefit was right in front of him. It was not Su Yi's character to watch others get it. Whoosh. Chapter 579. Whoosh. But at the same time, a sharp and cold fingerprint swept past Su Yi's back. The sharp strength chi caused the hairs on the back of Su Yi's head to stand on end, and he had no choice but to be obstructed. Su Yi knew that the one who attacked was Yun Lingfeng, so he flipped his hand and released a palm print, causing his essence to leak out and condense into a shield of light. Chi. The strong winds collided, and the essence surged, causing the surrounding rocks to explode. Brat, you have no fate with the supreme benefit. You are not qualified to have them. Yun Lingfeng's cold voice came out, the corner of his mouth lifted into a cold sneer. His figure took the opportunity to rush over, and his hand that was covered with a strange blood light directly grabbed onto the sword hilt. Buzz! The divine armament rumbled endlessly, as if it had a great power that wanted to shake off Yun Lingfeng's palm. Yun Lingfeng's palm was filled with a strange blood light, and it burst out with a dazzling light. At this moment, the blood light seemed to carry the same kind of chi, and directly covered the sword hilt. At the same time, Yun Lingfeng's eyes were filled with joy, and he immediately grabbed onto the sword hilt. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Boom. At this moment, the entire mountain peak trembled, and the earth shook. Outside the divine sword valley, Situ Luyun and the other elders had not left, and were waiting nervously. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Boom. The entire divine sword valley suddenly trembled, and from the depths of the void, clouds surged, and along the edge of the divine sword valley, a mist rose. Bam! Immediately after, a loud thunderous sound resounded, shaking the heavens and the earth, reverberating throughout the entire Shenzhen Gate. A resplendent light soared into the sky from within the divine sword valley, and an unparalleled chi swept out in all directions with the divine sword valley as the center, causing the entire Shenzhen Gate to be alarmed. Whoosh whoosh, inside the Shenzhen Gate, countless figures flew out, following the chi and looking at the source of the chi. Rumble. The earth shook, the clouds surged, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled, as if something terrifying was awakening. What's that? What's going on? Cries of alarm rang out one after another. The terrifying aura made the Shenzhen Gate disciples shudder with fear. A figure soared into the sky, broke through the air, and appeared outside the divine sword valley. One figure after another appeared. Their auras were powerful, and the light on their bodies fluctuated as if a bright moon was descending. Everyone stared at the divine sword valley in shock. All of them were elders and experts of the Shenzhen Gate. Such a huge commotion is unprecedented. Could it be that someone has obtained the ancestors' divine weapon? Some elders were extremely excited. Their eyes were trembling, and they were incomparably nervous. Every time a disciple entered the divine sword valley, they would never cause such a commotion. Perhaps this time, there really was a disciple who had obtained the inheritance left behind by the patriarch. Someone has obtained supreme benefits and obtained the legacy of our patriarch. Is our Shenzhen Gate going to prosper this time? An old expert from Shenzhen Gate was extremely excited. Elder Bai Mingshan's figure also appeared in the void as he observed the commotion within the divine sword valley. His eyes flickered with radiance. Buzz buzz, woo woo on the majestic mountain peak, light was overflowing into the sky, and the entire mountain was on the verge of collapse. The divine weapon was already in Yun Lingfeng's hands. His figure floated low in the air along with the divine weapon, his feet off the ground. The divine weapon clanged, ancient runes and symbols lingered, the scarlet-red light connected with Yun Lingfeng, and a terrifying aura soared into the sky, shaking the void. On Yun Lingfeng's palm, the blood light connected with the divine weapon. Quietly, half of Yun Lingfeng's eyes were as red as blood, while the other half was suffused with black spots. It was extremely strange and terrifying. Rumble, above the vast void, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, as if it was the end of the world. The entire majestic mountain seemed to be on the verge of cracking as it shot out endless rays of light, mixed with that terrifying aura. Buzz buzz! On the stone platforms, the treasured swords hummed in unison. Light filled the air and resounded through the clouds. Crack crack, the light barrier that was originally blocking Oluo, Sakura Asaka, Gong Chi, and the others also cracked and disappeared. Dang dang! The light barrier disappeared, and a powerful impact swept out in all directions like a hurricane, causing everyone to be forced back. Ryugan River, Mu Yao, and Jian Shi were no exception as they staggered back. The impact was too strong, and the aura was vast and terrifying. It was impossible to resist. Unparalleled benefits. Did Yun Lingfeng obtain the ancestors' divine weapon? Everyone's eyes trembled. Under such a terrifying scene, it seemed that Yun Lingfeng had already obtained the ancestors' divine weapon. What is Su Yi doing? Does he still want to fight? Yushanha exclaimed. In the midst of the impact of the energy hurricane, there was still one person standing like a boulder. His legs had sunk into the rocks on the ground, and the surrounding cracks were cracking, refusing to retreat. That figure, if it was not Su Yi, who else could it be? One by one, gazes were fixed on Su Yi. The strangest thing about the energy impact was that it was mixed with a terrifying aura that affected one's soul, making it impossible to resist. Su Yi refused to retreat. The unparalleled benefits were right in front of him, and it would be a pity if he failed. If there was no fate, then he would force it. Whether it was fate or not, if he could get it, then he would get it first. Su Yi's character had always been like this. B3 Yangjuju W Waifu, asterisk Phi to C small s say. It would be best if this unparalleled benefit was fated with him. If it was not, then he would be happy to snatch it. The terrifying aura affected the soul, but Su Yi could still resist it with the heavenly origin demon soul in his mind. Boom! Su Yi operated the Origin Supreme technique, and a domineering and majestic aura of destruction gushed out. Step by step, he moved forward in the energy hurricane. Step by step, Su Yi's feet landed on the ground, and the rocks on the ground cracked along the soles of his feet. The closer he got, the greater the impact of the terrifying energy. If it was not for Su Yi's diamond body, Su Yi's body would have been torn apart. This guy is too scary. Oluo clicked his tongue, and his heart jumped. He's definitely a ferocious person. Qin Fong clicked his tongue. He was very clear about the terror of the energy hurricane. Is this guy trying to snatch it by force? Ryugan River was in a sorry state, and there was a faint lightning in his eyes. Looking at Su Yi's actions, it seemed that he wanted to snatch the ancestors' divine weapon that had fallen into Yun Lingfeng's hands. Ryugan River clicked his tongue. This kind of treasure could only be obtained by those who were fated. It would choose its own owner, and it could not be forced. The ancestors' divine weapon has not been confirmed to belong to Yun Lingfeng. Anyone can snatch it. Situ Muyang curled his lips. He was very unhappy. What was snatching? The ancestors' divine weapon had not been confirmed to belong to Yun Lingfeng. Anyone could snatch it. The distance wasn't too far. Su Yi arrived in front of the divine weapon, and his eyes were filled with scarlet light. The divine weapon rumbled and emitted a dazzling light, causing lightning to flash and thunder to roll. The wind rose and clouds surged. Yun Lingfeng's eyes were covered by the scarlet light, and there were frightening black spots. It was as if he had entered a strange state and was connected to the divine weapon. It was as if he did not see Su Yi. Su Yi raised his eyes, and the origin supreme technique in his body was operated to the extreme. An aura that could not be provoked gushed out. It was domineering, sharp, and majestic. He leaped out and directly grabbed the divine weapon. Swish! Chapter 580. Boom! Din Suyi's body, the origin supreme technique, seemed to have been provoked. Its aura erupted and forcefully wrapped around the divine weapon, wanting to sweep it away. However, at this moment, a monstrous and terrifying aura swept out from the divine weapon like a torrential demonic aura. It rushed straight into Suyi's body and into Suyi's mind. In an instant, Su-yi saw corpses strewn across the land, an endless abyss, and the wailing of ghosts and gods. Everything was destroyed and destroyed. This scene was different from what Su-yi saw in the broken sword. Although these scenes were equally terrifying, the scene in front of him was much more sinister. In the broken sword behind him, the scene Su-yi saw was even more murderous. However, this aura was monstrous demonic aura that corroded everything. In an instant, this aura rushed into Su-yi's body as if it wanted to destroy everything. It rushed into Su-yi's heaven origin demonic soul, and even his heaven origin demonic soul couldn't stop it. Boom! The mysterious space that was silent in Su-yi's mind moved. A blazing and boundless aura burst out and spread across his mind, destroying the monstrous demonic aura in an instant. The monstrous demonic aura seemed to be extremely fearful of the aura in the mysterious space. It rushed out in fear and immediately retreated like a tide. Boom! A huge shockwave hit Su-yi's body, and a terrifying aura swept out. Su-yi tried his best to resist, but he couldn't resist. Su-yi was shocked. The blood in his body surged, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was then sent flying and fell to the ground. Puff! Spitting out blood, Su-yi was seriously injured. The power contained in the divine weapon was too great, and Su-yi couldn't bear it. Yunling Feng's eyes were as red as blood. He seemed to have been affected by Su-yi's actions. Faint black spots flickered in his eyes. He looked at Su-yi, who was seriously injured, and a murderous aura filled his eyes. Chi! Yunling Feng acted, wielding the divine weapon in his hand. At this moment, his silhouette was as fast as lightning, instantly appearing before Su-yi as he stabbed out with his sword. You don't have the qualifications to fight for the divine weapon. Die, brat! Yunling Feng shouted coldly, his killing intent surging. With the divine weapon in his hand, he arrived in front of Su-yi. Su-yi's eyes were filled with shock. He was simply unable to dodge. Under the heavy injuries, he could only circulate all the yuan qi in his body and condense it in front of him as he rapidly retreated. Yunling Feng, what are you doing? In the distance, Situ Muyang shouted loudly. His figure quickly rushed out, wanting to help. Qi-la, it was too fast. The yuan qi light shield in front of Su-yi was like tofu in front of the divine weapon. It could not withstand a single blow and shattered inch by inch. Yunling Feng's eyes were filled with killing intent. Su-yi's eyes widened, and the aura on his body suddenly soared several times. The divine weapon was as red as blood. Its aura was monstrous, and it directly pierced into Su-yi's chest. Swish! The divine weapon was like lightning, piercing through Su-yi's chest. At this moment, Su-yi's diamond body could not block the divine weapon. Pfff! Su-yi spat out a mouthful of blood. A terrifying demonic aura once again surged into the divine weapon, wanting to destroy everything. In Su-yi's mind, the mysterious space once again erupted with brilliant light, spreading out and destroying the demonic aura that had rushed into Su-yi's body. Boss Su-yi! Situ Muyang exclaimed as his body was sent flying. The terrifying energy hurricane in front of him was not something he could get close to. Mu Yao, Sakura Asaka, Gong Chi, Ryugan River and the others were all shocked. TSK, what are you going to use to fight with me? Die. Yunling Feng sneered loudly, He pulled out his sword and kicked Su Yi's body away. Bang bang! Su Yi's body smashed onto the square stone platform. Blood flowed out from his chest, forming a pool of blood. The divine weapon Scarlet Dragon belongs to me from now on. Yun Lingfeng no longer paid attention to Su Yi. In his heart, Su Yi was already a dead man. He brandished his sword and stood there. On the divine weapon, the scarlet light was like blood, and the light seemed to illuminate the entire divine sword valley. Buzz buzz! On the stone platform, the treasured swords hummed and clanged. Light filled the air, and sharp sword chi fluctuated, as if they were on a pilgrimage. Boom! The majestic mountain shook, and the surrounding space began to undergo a strange change. The distorted space was like a tight fried dough twist. A terrifying aura also spread out from the middle of the stone platform that Su Yi had smashed onto. A dazzling light shot out from the cracks in all directions. Rumble! Cracks the size of an arm split open on the entire mountain. They grew bigger and bigger, and huge rocks rolled down. The aura became more and more terrifying. Buzz buzz! The treasured swords rumbled and began to fly out. They were filled with light and spiraled above the void. Not good, it seems like it's going to collapse, Gu Chenyu exclaimed. At this moment, the huge mountain was about to collapse. These treasured swords are all extraordinary. Those who are fated will obtain them, Si Shiyuan said. At this moment, the treasured swords seemed to have moved, and his mind communicated with the treasured swords. Swish! A treasured sword was filled with light and pressure as it descended. Si Shiyuan has obtained an opportunity. Everyone was moved. Si Shiyuan had really obtained an opportunity. Although everyone's goal this time was to obtain supreme benefits left behind by the ancestor, the treasured swords had already been obtained. At this moment, the divine weapon had fallen into the hands of Yun Lingfeng. Everyone could only settle for the next best thing. If they could obtain other treasured swords, this trip would not have been in vain. Figures immediately communicated with the treasured swords, hoping to gain something. Buzz! The treasured swords hummed and flickered. There was indeed some movement. Many people's treasured swords burst out with bright light and landed in front of everyone. Boss Su Yi! Situ Muyang shouted loudly. The Imperial Wind battle armor on his body was activated, but he could not get close to the front. He was blasted away by the impact, and blood kept flowing out of his mouth. Mu Yao and Gong Qi's eyes were focused at this moment. They were quietly trying to get closer, but it was useless. When they saw someone communicating with the treasured swords and obtaining an opportunity, they secretly retreated. Rumble! The entire majestic mountain finally began to collapse completely. The earth shook and the mountains shook. Countless rays of light shot into the sky. Huge rocks rolled down, and the mountain poured down in all directions, drowning everything. The mountain collapsed from top to bottom, and countless huge rocks rolled down. It was as if 100,000 beasts were surging, and the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. The scene was extremely terrifying. Not good. Ryugan River, Gu Chenyu, and the others' expressions changed drastically. They used their remaining strength to form their vital qi and floated in midair. Boss Su Yi! Situ Muyang cried out in grief. The wings of the Imperial Wind battle armor on his back flapped, and he wanted to rush into the collapsed mountain to save Su Yi. Mu Yao, Sakura Asaka, Gong Qi, and Ryugan River appeared on their vital qi. They seemed to want to save Su Yi, but they could not get close. Ouyang Shua also went forward. Ouyang Ran moved closer. Su Yi had saved him before, so he didn't retreat. Chapter 581. Situ Muyang wanted to rush in, but he could only watch as Su Yi sank into the mountain and was buried under the huge rocks and dust. He cried out loudly, his eyes wet. Rumble! Inside the collapsed mountain, there was also a mighty aura that soared into the sky, pushing back Mu Yao, Gong Chi and the others who wanted to approach. There's no other way, let's retreat first. Jian 11 came to Situ Muyang's side, his pitch-black eyes looking at Su Yi who was buried under the rolling rocks and dust. His expression was regretful, and he pulled Situ Muyang back. That terrifying aura soared into the sky, and if they were affected, it would be enough to sweep them in and bury them. None of them could resist. Yuan Qi took form under their feet and quickly left. They looked at the collapsed mountain with complicated expressions on their faces. Su Yi is buried. Qin Fang, Yu Shanhe and the other disciples were still in a daze. Such a terrifying guy, ever since he came to the Divine Sword sect, he had been singing loudly and was incomparably ferocious. The shock of the myriad sword assemblies' peak showdown was still fresh in their minds, but now it had already been buried. A young monstrous genius died just like that. Gong Qi and Mu Yao had complicated expressions in their eyes, and their eyes were covered with shadows. Yun Lingfeng soared into the sky, the giant wolf shadow under his feet was ferocious, and the divine weapon Crimson Dragon in his hand was shining brightly. Looking at the collapsed mountain below swallowing the blue-robed figure, Yun Lingfeng sneered. So what if he ascended the ascending heaven platform? So what if he had the legendary heaven rank talent? He would be able to shake the world in the future, and look down on the common people, but he had to be able to live until that day. He was the one who could really soar into the sky and look down on all the heroes. Now that the supreme benefits were in his hands, who could compete with him? Yun Lingfeng, you killed Boss Su Yi. I'm not done with you. Situ Muyang bellowed. His eyes were red, his fists were clenched, and veins were bulging on his face. He looked ferocious as he glared at Yun Lingfeng. The wings of the Wind Rider battlesuit flapped as he charged toward Yun Lingfeng. Boom! Situ Muyang's hair was already disheveled as he soared into the sky. Black light surged violently as he punched out. Energy swept out, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Su Yi stole my divine weapon and was accidentally killed by me. You can't blame me for that. Yun Lingfeng said coldly as he threw out a punch with his left arm to meet the attack. The two fists collided and energy burst forth. Situ Muyang was forced back. Yun Lingfeng did not dare to be too heavy-handed. This was Situ Muyang, the son of the sect leader. He was afraid of him. Rumble! The majestic mountain collapsed as the entire Divine Sword Valley rumbled endlessly. Light rays shot out from the distant sky as if the heavens were collapsing and the earth was splitting. Go quickly, we're going to be buried. With a hoarse voice, the mysterious mummy expert appeared once again. However, at this moment, there were several strange swords stabbed into his withered body. Everything was incomparably strange as he hurriedly said, Go, let's leave this place first, hurry! Ryugan River shouted. The entire Divine Sword Valley seemed to be changing, as if it was going to collapse and be buried. They had to leave as soon as possible. Let's get out of here first. Jian Yi once again pulled Situ Muyang. Let's go, one figure after another left in panic, rushing towards the exit. The entire Divine Sword Valley had already undergone an earth-shattering commotion, and they could not stay for long. I can't suppress it anymore. Looking at Ryugan River, Mu Yao and the other figures leaving one after another, the mummy's hoarse voice kept repeating those words. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Boom! Outside the Divine Sword Valley, the aura soared into the sky, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, as if it was the end of the world. One figure after another floated in the air, their eyes resplendent. Nothing will happen to them inside, right? What exactly happened inside? Some of the elders' faces became more and more serious. The commotion inside the Divine Sword Valley was getting louder and louder. A terrifying aura spread out through the Divine Sword Valley, causing them to feel apprehensive. I hope nothing bad happens. Some of the elders looked worried. The disciples who entered the Divine Sword Valley this time were all representatives of the younger generation of the Xinjiang Gate. Su Yi, Mu Yao, Yun Ling Feng and the other disciples, all of them had abnormal talent. Not to mention what happened, even if any of them had an accident, it would be a huge loss for the Xinjiang Gate. I hope that we only obtained a supreme benefit and not an accident. Seeing the increasingly shocking commotion, all the old experts of the Xinjiang Gate became extremely nervous. Sidu Liuyun's gaze was fixated on the exit. Such a terrifying commotion had already caused him to be worried. Someone seems to have come out. Suddenly, an elder exclaimed. A figure appeared at the exit, and someone came out. Everyone's gazes immediately gathered at the exit, and a formless aura locked onto the exit. Whoosh whoosh, very quickly, one figure after another appeared at the exit and quickly rushed out. Previous chapter, next chapter, boom. At this moment, an invisible aura suddenly distorted the space around the entire Divine Sword Valley. Light rays burst forth, forming an energy storm that enveloped the area. The distorted aura became denser and denser, and the sound of lightning and thunder became more and more intense, shaking one's eardrums. A terrifying aura spread out from within the Divine Sword Valley, causing the faces of the surrounding elders and experts to be filled with shock. That kind of aura caused their hearts to palpitate. Puff puff. When this kind of aura rushed out from the exit, it also sent one figure after another flying out from the exit. One figure after another fell from the sky like a stone ball that was sent flying. They spat out blood and outlined a bloody light. Whoosh whoosh, some of the elders had already rushed out. Their faces changed drastically as they wrapped around the figures in midair. It's them. The figures that were sent flying were Ryugan River, Mu Yao, Gong Qi, Oluo and the other disciples. Looking at the disciples who were being attacked one after another, the old man from the Divine Sword sect was certain that something huge had definitely happened in the Divine Sword Valley. That's Green Abyss Flaming Sword. Great Desolate Ancient Sword, Dark Light Sword. Oh my God, is this the Phoenix Sun Sword? Thunder Dragon Sky Demon Sword, this must be the Thunder Dragon Sky Demon Sword. When the figures rushed out one after another, they all held onto the opportunities they had obtained from the Divine Sword Valley. When the elders and experts noticed them, their eyes trembled and their pupils constricted. These were all famous treasured swords from the Xinjiang Gate back then. They were once famous in the world, and the disciples that entered this time all seemed to have had their own opportunities. How is it? In the air, Elder Bai Mingshan used both of his hands to hold on to Yun Lingfeng with a gentle force. He immediately asked Yun Lingfeng with a nervous expression. Chapter 582. Yun Lingfeng spat out a mouthful of blood, but the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. His hand reached out, and a crimson-red sword appeared in his hand. Although the light had dimmed, it was still filled with a terrifying sword energy. Ancient runes and symbols lingered around it, causing anyone who looked at it to shudder in fear. This is, Elder Bai Mingshan could not help but tremble, and his gaze was like lightning. Divine Weapon Red Dragon, left behind by the Ancestor. It is fated to be with me. Yun Lingfeng opened his mouth. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes revealed a smile. Ha 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 ha! Elder Bai Mingshan laughed. His laughter was mixed with vitality, and it was deafening when it was mixed with the sound of thunder and lightning. Everyone's eyes suddenly looked over, and all of them immediately focused on Yun Lingfeng's hand. That blood-red sword made everyone's heart skip a beat. In an instant, everyone's eyes were filled with passion, and their hearts were surging. Vaguely, they seemed to know something. Divine Weapon Red Dragon, left behind by the Ancestor. It is fated to be with Ling Feng, and the Xinjiang Gate is fortunate. Elder Bai Mingshan laughed loudly. He was excited and happy, and his voice shook the clouds. Divine Weapon Red Dragon, left behind by the Ancestor. All of the elders trembled in their hearts. Although they had already guessed it, they could not help but feel excited when they heard the confirmation. For so many years, the supreme benefits left behind by the ancestor had never been obtained by anyone. But today, the supreme benefits left behind by the ancestor had fallen into the hands of Yunlingfeng. It was left behind by the Xinjian Gate's ancestor. It was a supreme benefit, and everyone present knew what it meant. Everyone's eyes fell on Yunlingfeng. In the future, this kid would be famous in the world. Supreme benefits left behind by the ancestor. Situ Liuyun's eyes trembled. Yunlingfeng smiled. Supreme benefits fell into his hands, and from now on, he would be unrivaled among the younger generation of the Xinjian Gate. Soon, the entire Middle Region, and even the entire continent, would be under his control. Swoosh, swoosh. Suddenly, two figures charged out of the exit. Two whooshing sounds resounded. Then, two figures appeared beside the two figures. They grabbed the two of them and prevented them from falling to the ground. The two figures who attacked were Situ Luyun and an elder. The two people who were captured were Situ Muyang and Sword 11. Puchi Situ Muyang's wind-riding battlesuit was broken. He was vomiting blood. Situ Muyang's expression changed, and a pill was immediately stuffed into Situ Muyang's mouth. Father, Boss Su Yi was killed by Yunlingfeng on purpose. When he saw Situ Luyun, Situ Muyang immediately cried out loudly with tears in his eyes. In the battlefield of 10,000 swords, Su Yi had saved his life many times. Even in the Divine Sword Valley, Su Yi had always protected him. However, he could only watch as Su Yi was engulfed by the collapsed boulders and was helpless. He felt guilty and sorrowful. Su Yi was killed by Yunlingfeng. Situ Muyang's voice spread out and fell into the ears of the old powerhouses present. Suddenly, their expressions became complicated for no reason. Situ Liuyun's gaze trembled violently, and violent ripples appeared. Head % C hair by Mingshan looked at Yunlingfeng, as if he wanted to confirm the answer. Yunlingfeng sneered and signaled with his eyes. Humph. Elder by Mingshan snorted. So what if his disciple killed Su Yi? Yunlingfeng had obtained the ancestors' inheritance. He was no longer the same as before. Su Yi? One by one, the elders floated in the air and looked at Ryugan River, Qin Fang, and the other disciples who had just caught them. They wanted to know the answer. Ryugan River, Qin Fang, and the others nodded slightly. It was indeed Yunlingfeng who killed Su Yi on purpose. Huff, after getting a definite answer, the sound of many people sucking in a cold breath filled the air. Su Yi was killed by Yunlingfeng on purpose. With Su Yi's talent, this was a loss that the Xinjian Gate could not bear. However, everyone knew that Su Yi's death would cause a huge commotion in the Xinjian Gate. After all, Su Yi was no longer an outer disciple, but the disciple of that person. Yunlingfeng, how dare you! Situ Luyun shouted loudly. His anger could not be suppressed. His voice shook the heavens. His bright eyes immediately stared at Yunlingfeng's body, and a sharp aura enveloped him. Under this kind of aura, Yunlingfeng's heart trembled, and his soul felt uneasy. Rumble! The earth shook, and the entire Divine Sword Valley distorted. The energy was finally unable to be suppressed, and completely exploded in the air. The mountains collapsed and the earth cracked, as if it was the end of the world. The entire Divine Sword Valley exploded like a volcano. The energy storm was like a mushroom cloud that soared into the sky. The loud explosion caused everyone's ears to ring. Retreat, quickly! Feeling that terrifying scene, the elders and experts of the Xinjian Gate all revealed looks of shock. If they were to be affected, they would also be buried. One figure after another quickly retreated. The entire Divine Sword Valley was sinking and exploding everywhere. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Light soared into the sky and the earth shook. It was as if the mountains and seas were moving. After a long while, everything slowly calmed down. The dust that filled the sky fell, and their vision became clear again. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. The entire Divine Sword Valley had collapsed into the ground, and a large area seemed to have disappeared. In the distance, many disciples of the Shinjian Gate appeared. Such a huge commotion alarmed the entire Shinjian Gate. Looking at what was happening in the distance, the disciples of the Shinjian Gate sucked in a breath of cold air and broke out in cold sweat. They had no idea what was going on. The place in the distance was also a forbidden area, and ordinary disciples had no idea what kind of place it was. Divine Sword Valley has already sealed itself and buried itself. Disperse. There was an old voice that reverberated in the air, landing in the ears of many people. However, this voice only landed in the ears of many people. There were even more people who did not know and had never heard of it. It is said that that is the Divine Sword Valley, the place where the ancestors of our Shinjian Gate are buried. Senior brother Yunlingfeng has obtained the ancestors' legacy. That is a supreme benefit. From now on, among those of the same generation, senior brother Yunlingfeng will be the number one. Time slowly passed, and what happened in the Divine Sword Valley also spread throughout the Shinjian Gate. The commotion attracted everyone's attention, and it was impossible to hide it. Oh my God, that's the supreme benefit left behind by the ancestor. From now on, senior brother Yunlingfeng will be able to move unhindered in the central region. Some disciples were extremely envious. Yunlingfeng had obtained the ancestor's supreme benefit. That was a great opportunity. What a pity, Su-yi is actually dead. It is said that he has heaven-rank talent. Some people were regretful that Su-yi, who had such monstrous talent, had actually died. It was a pity. Yunlingfeng is too much. He must have been jealous of his defeat in the Myriad Sword Conference. He actually killed Su-yi. An outer sect disciple spoke out. Lower your voice, no one can afford to offend Yunlingfeng now. Chapter 583. What's there to be afraid of? If Su-yi is still alive, even if Yunlingfeng obtains some supreme benefits, he will still not be Su-yi's opponent. The number one person in the younger generation of Shinjian Gate will not be Yunlingfeng's turn. Many bold outer sect disciples whispered. Although Su-yi was fierce, he had never bullied them. This made them feel indignant for Su-yi. When he was in the Myriad Sword battlefield, Su-yi had plundered all the inner sect disciples and many direct disciples, but he had never made a move on the outer sect disciples. The setting sun was filled with clouds and mist, and the setting sun was like blood. Hiss, hiss, in a quiet courtyard, a towering tree, a 9-hell snake flicked its tongue. Although that guy is a bit annoying, he's not going to die. I clearly don't like him, but why do I feel so uncomfortable in my heart? Mu Yao looked at the setting sun, her delicate red lips whispering at this moment, trying to attract people to kiss her, but her expression was solemn, and her eyebrows were knitted. The 9-hell snake leaned against Mu Yao, as if it could feel her mood, and intimately rubbed against her, as if it wanted to comfort Mu Yao. The void moved slightly, and a figure quietly appeared. It was a beautiful woman in her 50s, who looked extremely young. Her figure was exquisite, and her clothes were elegant and luxurious. Her black hair was gently tied into a flowing cloud bun. Swoosh, swoosh, seeing the beautiful woman coming, the 9-hell snake immediately revealed a look of reverence, and lowered its head, not daring to raise it easily. Master! Seeing the beautiful woman coming, Mu Yao immediately got up and ran over, and asked the beautiful woman, "How is Master?" On the beautiful woman's face, a pair of bright and deep black eyes flashed with a hint of regret. She shook her head at Mu Yao and said softly, "Divine Sword Valley was personally arranged by the ancestor of Shinjian Gate, and now it has completely collapsed and buried everything. No one can enter again." Master, could it be that he really... Mu Yao's nose twitched for no reason, and her last hope was shattered. Even if he's still alive, he won't be able to come out again. The beautiful woman shook her head in regret. She said softly, "For a brat like that to die prematurely, it is truly regretful. If that bastard is still alive, I won't bother him anymore. I don't like him, but I don't want him to die. Mu Yao murmured, tears welling up in her eyes. Old man Su seems to like that kid a lot. If he knew. I'm afraid he wouldn't feel too good about it. The beautiful woman also seemed to be a little absent-minded at this moment. The afterglow of the setting sun filled the void. Most, New Chapter 9, Mo Supra P. Gong Chi's eyes were absent-minded as he recalled that smiling face in his mind. Do you like me and want to marry me? But even if you do, I really don't have any mystical spiritual fruits for you. These words echoed in Gong Chi's mind. That scene was still vivid in her mind and could not be erased. Why would I think of him? I clearly hate him so much, Gong Chi muttered to himself, his eyes beautiful. The overlapping mountain ranges were magnificent and magnificent. This was a sacred place that stretched for tens of thousands of miles. Between the ink-blue mountain peaks there was a mist rising. The peak of the Green Mountain was like an ink painting of mountains and rivers, like a fairyland. Whoosh! On the peak of the mountain, a graceful figure in a fiery red dress bathed in the sunset glow. In each of her hands was a curved saber. Rays of saber light swept out as her wrist rotated the saber hilt. The saber in her hands hummed and shone brightly. The two curved sabers were moving as they slowly rotated faster and faster. Whoosh, 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 rays of saber light swept out like crescent moons and became faster and faster. The gravel and leaves on the ground were also swept up as if they were condensed into a hurricane. The saber light broke through the air and spun. The figure in a fiery red dress was as light as a swallow. The two sabers flashed as fast as lightning. The crescent saber light flashed and merged with the figure in a fiery red dress. The crimson saber light and the figure in a fiery red dress formed a sea of fire on the peak of the mountain. The woman's soft and boneless waist danced with the two sabers. She was like a fairy surrounded by the bright crescent saber light. After a long time, the crescent saber light disappeared. The figure in a fiery red dress stood. The two curved sabers were outlined in front of her, as if forming an arc. It added valiance to the graceful figure. This graceful figure was a girl of 16 or 17 years old. Her skin was whiter than snow, and she was incomparably delicate and beautiful. Looking at the blood-red sunset and the girl's beautiful face, there was a kind of silence for a long time. Junior Sister Ruashi's strength is getting more and more terrifying. A voice sounded, and a girl of about 16 or 17 years old appeared on the mountain. Senior Sister Li Ling, the woman in a fiery red dress, looked back and smiled slightly. She was not surprised, as if she had already known that someone would come. I just came out of seclusion not long ago, so I came to see you on the way. The girl's lips were like cherry blossoms, and her eyebrows were like ink paintings. She was about the same age as the woman in a fiery red dress, only slightly older. Her slender and beautiful legs, towering chest, and slim waist together outlined a moving arc. It was enough to make any man unable to help but take a few more glances. If Su Yi was here, he would definitely be able to recognize that this girl was Li Ling from the Saint Mountain. He had been to the barbarian city before, and he had interacted with her before. It seems that Senior Sister Li Ling has improved a lot. The girl in red smiled. Her eyes were bright and clear, shining like the stars in the sky. Under her red dress, her curves were exquisite, and her figure was curvaceous. Her red dress was like fire, and her temperament was like a lone plum in winter. She had a graceful and arrogant air about her. This was a kind of beauty that was different from Li Ling's. Li Ling's beauty was enough to make any man unable to help but take a few more glances. However, the girl in a fiery red dress beauty was somewhat opposite. She was so beautiful that no man dared to approach her. She was so beautiful that even women would be jealous of her. No matter how much I've improved, I can't compare to you. You're too scary. Li Ling smiled and looked at the girl in a fiery red dress, as if she wanted to say something. "Senior sister, are you here for something?" The girl in a fiery red dress sensed it and smiled. Her eyes were curved like crescent moons, and her charm seemed to be overflowing. Between her frown and smile, her temperament was like a tulip, noble and elegant. Under the sunset, the girl in a fiery red dress seemed to be shrouded in a thin layer of red mist. It seemed real and illusory at the same time. She was like a flower that had just bloomed, bright and beautiful. "I just came out of seclusion and received a piece of news. I'm not sure if I should tell you." Li Ling hesitated and smiled faintly. Her temperament was the opposite of the girl in a fiery red dress, but she was equally charming. If she had 2 more years, she would probably be unparalleled in this world. Chapter 584. I heard that a young man named Su Yi suddenly appeared in the recent Myriad Sword Conference at Xinjiang Gate and won first place. He's quite young. As Li Ling spoke, she looked at the red-clothed girl. She had just come out of seclusion and inadvertently learned of this news. She still remembered that special youth in Barbarian City and knew that there was an invisible relationship between that youth and this junior apprentice sister. Su Yi, when these 2 words fell into her ears, the red-clothed young girl's beautiful face that was shining brilliantly was instantly fiercely moved. "It seems that junior sister still remembers that young man?" Li Ling asked without showing any trace of emotion. "Of course I remember." The girl in red pretended to be calm, but her heart was pounding. She looked at Li Ling and suddenly asked, "Senior sister, are you sure it's that Su Yi?" "I don't know." Li Ling shook her head and looked at the girl in red. She smiled and joked, but Su Yi really miraculously didn't die. He must be that person in Xinjiang Gate. Something must have happened to him. To be able to become the champion of the Myriad Sword Conference at Xinjiang Gate, his relationship with junior sister is at least a little closer. "I have nothing to do with him. He's just a pervert." The girl in red pouted her red lips and pretended to be disdainful. "Is that so?" Li Ling said softly. "Maybe they have the same name. After all, Su Yi is already dead. There aren't so many miracles in the world." "Senior sister, can you help me keep an eye on Su Yi and see if he's manching?" The red-clothed girl looked at Li Ling, her beautiful eyes shining brightly. "It doesn't matter whether he is or not. Anyway, junior sister doesn't care." Li Ling smiled and pretended to be joking. "If he's really still alive, then it's because God has eyes. That pervert, I will definitely kill him with my own hands." The red-clothed girl clenched her teeth and pretended to be angry. However, her eyes were filled with light. She had bright eyes and white teeth. Her slender waist, tall figure, and straight and slender legs outlined a perfect and moving arc. Night fell. Xinjiang Gate, 36th Sword Peak, Back Mountain. In the valley, Situ Muyang, Su Jiahui, Zhang Qing, Lu Ji, Wang Fan, and a dozen others were there. There was a lonely grave with a blank tombstone and a few cups of white wine. "Su Yi boss, once we have the chance, we will avenge you." Situ Muyang, Zhang Qing, Wang Fan, Lu Ji, and others had tears in their eyes. "Brother Su Yi." Su Jiahui's beautiful eyes were moist, and she was so sad that her body trembled. "Someone wants to protect Yunlingfeng. I'm not strong enough to avenge you. But Boss Su Yi, I'll definitely think of a way to avenge you," said Situ Muyang. His eyes were filled with determination. The mysterious space was dark, but a faint fluorescent light was emitted from somewhere, preventing the space from turning pitch black. No one could see that Su Yi was lying on the cracked stone platform. The ancient stone platform had lost its light. Blood was flowing and his body was in a terrible state, especially Su Yi's chest. There was a 3-finger-wide sword hole through his back. His flesh was badly mangled and his bones were exposed. It was a horrifying sight. Su Yi was completely unconscious. There was no aura on his body. It was as if he was really dead. He was completely unconscious, as if he was really dead. Su Yi's origin supreme art did not disappear. His body was covered in blood and his wounds were drying up. However, there was no sign of recovery. First, Su Yi's chest had been pierced. His heart had been shattered. Even if there were experts here, they would shake their heads. His heart had been pierced. It was difficult to heal such a serious injury. It was impossible for a miracle to happen. In the dark space, there was a deathly silence. Time had lost its meaning. 1 day, 2 days, 1 year, 10 years. There was no difference in this dark and deathly silent space. No one could see that in Su Yi's mind, the mysterious space was constantly emitting a faint light. It shone in his mind, causing the heavenly Yuan demonic soul to fluctuate in scarlet light. His soul was undying. No one knew how much time had passed. Su Yi's shattered heart was quietly covered by a layer of sunlight-like light. Immediately after, a peculiar radiance emanated from Su Yi's bones, muscles, meridians, and acupoints from the inside out. The light was rather dim at first. However, as time passed, it became more and more dazzling. It was accompanied by a strange aura that reverberated in this strange space. Su Yi was drenched in blood, and his body that was riddled with wounds was slowly recovering at this moment. This recovery did not come from the diamond body. The speed of recovery did not seem to be as fast as the diamond body. However, at this moment, Su Yi's body was recovering. It was accompanied by a mysterious aura. It was as if something was awakening from a deep sleep. In the end, the light from Su Yi's body spread from inside to outside. It wrapped his entire body. It became more and more dazzling. The light shone on this mysterious space, like a cocoon of light. Xinjian Gate, Sky Sword Peak. Now that I think about it, I've let that kid down. In the study, Sidu Luyun stood with his hands behind his back. There was a hint of regret on his face. Sect leader, you don't have to blame yourself. This has nothing to do with you. The right protector looked at Sidu Luyun. His expression was solemn. He said regretfully, the heavens are jealous of talents. Perhaps that kid's talent is too good. This is his fate. He is destined to be unable to reach the heavens. This is not the jealousy of the heavens. It is Yun Lingfeng who purposely killed him. He destroyed the future of my Xinjian Gate. Sidu Luyun clenched his fists tightly behind his back. His gaze surged. He understood the specific situation and said, if I had insisted on only letting Su Yi enter the Divine Sword Valley, perhaps all of this would not have happened. The supreme benefits left behind by the ancestor would have also fallen into the hands of Su Yi. But now that the ancestor has left it in the hands of Yun Lingfeng, and Su Yi has also died, many of the elders in the sect have paid attention to Yun Lingfeng. The right protector sighed. He knew what sect leader Situ Luyun was thinking. He valued Su Yi more. But now everything had changed. Yun Lingfeng had killed Su Yi, and it was difficult for him to be severely punished. Everything was because the ancestor had left it on Yun Lingfeng. He was the future of Xinjian Gate, and was protected by many elders in Xinjian Gate. Has Elder Su come out of seclusion? After a moment of silence, Situ Luyun asked the right protector with a frown. Not yet. I have already arranged for disciples to keep an eye on him. Once Elder Su comes out of seclusion, they will immediately report to me. Hearing that, the right protector's expression became serious. He hesitated for a moment, and with a trace of expectation, he asked Situ Luyun. This Su Yi is actually not Elder Su's direct disciple. He did not truly acknowledge him as his master. Maybe Elder Su will not. The right protector wanted to say something but hesitated. I hope so, Situ Luyun sighed. After a moment of silence, he said, make arrangements for those disciples. You must not let Elder Su know about it. Especially Mu Yang, Su Jiahui, and Zhang Qing. You must pay attention to them. The right protector nodded. He knew what Situ Luyun was afraid of. Chapter 585. In this mysterious space, time was completely meaningless. A dazzling cocoon of light lay on the cracked ancient stone platform, illuminating this space. No one could see that Su Yi's body was wrapped in this cocoon of light. In Su Yi's chest, the shattered heart was shrouded in a layer of sunlight-like brilliance. His bones, muscles, meridians, and acupoints were all emitting a strange radiance. The radiance became more and more dazzling, accompanied by a strange aura that reverberated. Su Yi's bloody body was also slowly recovering. It seemed that not long after, the wounds on his body had already disappeared. Only the sword wound on his chest that had pierced through his heart was still deep enough to see the bone. I knew I shouldn't have been involved with a human. Fortunately, I've already awakened, otherwise I would have been killed by you. I still have to save your life. Suddenly, in this void where time was meaningless, such a faint voice suddenly filled the air. At the same time, there seemed to be an invisible force fluctuating. A strange scene appeared. On Su Yi's pierced heart, the mysterious sunlight-like brilliance and aura became more and more dazzling, as if it carried a kind of vitality, constantly surging into the heart. From Su Yi's bones, muscles, meridians, and acupoints, the radiance that permeated from inside to outside seemed to be drawn by some kind of force, constantly converging. Finally, in a strange flow, it endlessly surged into Su Yi's heart. A strange scene appeared. Su Yi's heart, which had stopped beating, suddenly began to beat. Boom! It was also at this moment that in Su Yi's mind, the light that filled the mysterious space suddenly intensified. The light was incomparably dazzling, accompanied by an incomparably scorching aura that spread directly to Su Yi's entire body. Under this terrifying scorching aura, Su Yi did not know whether he was dead or alive, and all the hair on his body stood on end. A terrifying heat filled his entire body, as if to burn his meridians and blood vessels. In a daze, Su Yi seemed to be immersed in a strange dream. He felt as if he was about to be instantly burned and withered by a terrifying heat. A wu guji. No one knew where it came from, but the shocking roar of a beast was like a thunderclap from the ninth heaven. It was deafening, and an ancient land gradually appeared in the surroundings. It was a vast and boundless heaven and earth. Surging flames spread in all directions, and the scarlet light illuminated the ninth heaven. Dazzling flames filled the sky like interweaving divine chains that connected the heavens and the earth. Awu in the sky, the incomparably huge demonic beast was entrenched like a huge mountain. Its terrifying aura was surging, and it was surrounded by a halo of light. There were also huge ferocious birds that spread their wings and covered the sky. When one stood in front of them, they were like ants in front of the sky. They were incomparably tiny. There was a huge tiger that was coiled up. Its entire body was shining with white light, and it was about to pounce as it roared like thunder. A giant bird spread its wings and covered the sky. Its ferocious eyes were like two seas of fire that could burn everything. There was a giant tortoise standing in the void. The tortoise and the serpent intertwined. Inky black light overflowed into the sky. Divine light constantly rose behind it, as if it was suppressing the world. There was a giant dragon coiling about, multicolored light shining in all directions, able to tear apart heaven and earth. There was a gigantic figure that towered thousands of feet, occupying this world like a deity. Strange phenomena constantly appeared in the surroundings. The river of stars fell, the universe was in turmoil, the heavens collapsed and the earth cracked. A huge shadow stood between the heavens and the earth. The stars revolved in its palm, and the sun behind it created 1,000 layers of stormy waves. Wind and thunder resounded, accompanied by the endless rumbling of the heavens, sonorous and ear-splitting. How shocking was all of this! It was like a Buddha. All of this was familiar yet strange, as if déjà vu. Under the vast and terrifying aura, Su Yi, who had just woken up, immediately fainted. Where did this kid come from? Why does he have such an aura? The faint voice became horrified, as if it had seen the most unbelievable thing. Whoosh, from Su Yi's body, the radiance spread from the inside to the outside, enveloping his entire body. It became more and more dazzling, and the cocoon of light formed around his body became more and more resplendent. At this moment, if someone was by Su Yi's side, they would definitely be able to discover that on the sword wound on Su Yi's chest that was difficult to heal, a wisp of scarlet light gathered. It was like gossamer, growing in number and becoming more and more dazzling. In the end, it crawled into Su Yi's shattered heart and drilled into it. When the scarlet light surged into his heart, not only did the wound on Su Yi's heart not heal, it even began to corrode and melt bit by bit. It kept cracking and shattering, as if it was about to be completely destroyed. The light of life that had originally covered Su Yi's heart seemed to be unable to stop the destruction of the scarlet light at all. The speed at which Su Yi's heart cracked and shattered was not fast, but it continued, showing signs of completely shattering. However, the strange thing was that Su Yi's gradually shattering heart did not disperse into a bloody mist, but condensed together. The scarlet light seemed to carry a strange energy that connected Su Yi's shattered heart together. It shattered but did not disperse, cracked but did not separate. Gradually, Su Yi's entire heart seemed to have turned into a ball of scarlet fire within the scarlet light. The high temperature spread and spread throughout his body, as if it wanted to burn everything. His entire body was burned to ashes. Cool, J. Craftsman's net L Yong A, free for a long time. Little Y. In a daze, as if he was in a dream, Su Yi's hazy consciousness woke up. He could not help but scream in the depths of his soul. The heart-burning pain caused his soul to twitch. In an instant Su Yi quivered. Although he did not have the strength to open his eyes, his soul was completely awake. He could feel everything in his chest, as if his entire heart had turned into a sea of fire. The pain was unbearable. It was heart-burning. Su Yi felt that his heart seemed to have turned into ashes, but it still existed. It was as if his heart had been dug out. The pain was heart-wrenching and indescribable. It was definitely the most terrifying ordeal in the world. Only a freak like Su Yi, who had experienced all kinds of extreme tests and undergone all kinds of inhuman tempering, could still hold on at this moment. If it was an ordinary person, they would have died long ago. Sizzle, in Su Yi's chest, there was even a sizzling smoke. His entire heart was completely wrapped in scarlet light and began to fill the air with flames. If this were to continue, Su Yi's entire heart might really turn into ashes and be completely incinerated. However, in this terrible situation, Su Yi also felt the aura of the Origin Supreme technique faintly spreading in his body. The familiar yet strange scene from not long ago still remained in his heart. Origin Demon Body, Diamond Body, Heavenly Origin Demon Soul, could it be? Suddenly, Su Yi's soul shook as if he had thought of something. Chapter 586. Huff, on the mountain peak, a skinny figure appeared and stretched lazily. It was an old face, but his body was like that of an 8 or 9-year-old child. He seemed to be in his 60s or 70s, and the faint wrinkles on his face were like traces left by time. This was Elder Su. His face was well-defined, and it could be vaguely seen that when he was young, he must have been quite handsome. In the Xinjian Gate, some disciples had privately discussed that a long time ago, Elder Su was also a handsome and peerless young man. But later, something seemed to have happened. Elder Su's figure changed greatly, and his character became extremely unsociable. He was already kind to the people of the Xinjian Gate. It was rumored that outside, someone just looked at Elder Su, and Elder Su destroyed his entire sect, razing it to the ground and turning it into ashes. There was an expert from a powerful sect who had once mocked Elder Su's appearance in private. When Elder Su found out about it, he chased after him for thousands of miles. Not only that, it was rumored that Elder Su had skinned this person and cut off his bones. His ruthlessness was enough to make one's hair stand on end. Later, this sect was indignant and wanted to seek justice, but Elder Su directly guarded the sect for 3 months, and killed every disciple who came out. Elder Su had done many of these things, so Elder Su was also known as the Sword Yama Suruga in the outside world. Bathing in the morning sun, Elder Su's robe was very fitting, and the light white hair in his black hair added a bit of temperament. Then, without seeing how his figure moved, he disappeared in an instant. Early in the morning, on the 36th Sword Peak, many young disciples were busy with chores. For outer disciples, they had to finish a certain amount of chores every day before they had time to cultivate. Elder Su's figure appeared in the void. He intended to cross over, but his figure suddenly stopped and then landed. "Who asked you to come?" Looking at the 20 figures in front of him, Elder Su frowned slightly. His gaze moved slightly, calm and deep. The sudden voice caused the group of disciples to panic. When they saw the figure that had suddenly appeared, they immediately bowed. "Greetings, Elder Su. The sect sent us to the 36th Sword Peak to learn." Some of the disciples' expressions changed. They seemed to be suppressing the panic in their hearts, and they pretended to be calm as they replied to Elder Su. "Where are Lu Ji, Wang Fan and the others?" Elder Su's eyes were as tranquil as an ancient well. "Call them over." Elder Su, Lu Ji, Wang Fan, and a few other outer disciples have already gone to the Holy Sword Cliff to cultivate in seclusion, a young man who seemed to be the leader replied. "All of them are in seclusion?" Elder Su asked. "Yes, they are all in seclusion." That young man's heart trembled for no reason. Elder Su's gaze landed on him, as though he wanted to see through him. That gaze was like a sword, wanting to pierce through him. Bang! Before that young man's voice had completely faded, a muffled sound was emitted from his body. His body fell to the ground, and blood spurted out from the corner of his mouth. "You're not outer sect disciples at all. You're all inner sect disciples, but you're pretending to be outer sect disciples. You'd better tell me honestly, where are Lu Ji, Wang Fan, and the others? Who sent you here? Don't you know the rules of the 36th Sword Peak?" With Elder Su's eyesight, none of this could escape his eyes. Initially, he was a little surprised that his 36th Sword Peak was filled with unfamiliar figures. Looking at these young men, he realized that none of them were outer sect disciples. Judging from their words, they did not seem to be outer sect disciples. However, they were pretending to be inner sect disciples. This was definitely not normal. Elder Su's spiritual strength swept across the surroundings. He frowned slightly. He did not see a single familiar disciple on the 36th Sword Peak. Something must have happened. On the latest T-Chapter ZP Festival. "Elder Su, please forgive us. This has nothing to do with us. It's... The group of disciples suddenly trembled. They were so frightened that they immediately knelt on the ground, trembling. "Hurry up and tell me what's going on. Otherwise, don't blame me for taking your lives," Elder Su shouted in a deep voice. It seemed that something had indeed happened. "Elder Su, it was the sect master who sent us here. Lu Ji, Wang Fan and the others were also taken away by the sect master," a disciple said in fear. Although he was afraid of the sect master, he was even more afraid of Elder Su in this situation. "What exactly happened? Tell me clearly or I'll kill you," Elder Su cried out in a deep voice. His short and small body had an aura that seemed to reach the clouds at this moment. His expression changed and a sharp glint surged out from his eyes. All of this was arranged by the sect leader. From the looks of it, something big must have happened. However, he had not been in a retreat for long and was actually unaware of everything. Elder Su, the sect master, did not want the news of Su Yi's death to be known to Elder Su. He was afraid that Elder Su would be too sad. A disciple said in a trembling voice, They knew that the sect master had specially arranged for them to come here from the Sky Sword Peak. He wanted to hide it from Elder Su for a period of time. Who would have thought that they could not hide it in front of Elder Su? What, Sui? Elder Su's face changed in an instant. His whole body trembled, and his feet trembled slightly. Immediately, Elder Su calmed down. He suppressed the fluctuation in his heart and asked, Sui died. How did he die? Well, these disciples wanted to say something but stopped. They looked at each other. At this moment, under Elder Su's power, they had planned to lie according to the plan. However, at this moment, they were so shocked that their hearts trembled. It's the truth. How did Sui die? Elder Su shouted. He felt more and more that things were not normal. If Suyi's death was not strange, there was no need for such an arrangement. It seemed that the whole Xinjiang Gate did not want him to know and wanted to hide it from him. Well, these disciples were trembling. The sect master had specially instructed them not to tell Elder Su how Sui died. Bang! A palm print suddenly appeared on the chest of a submissive disciple. With a low muffled sound, the disciple's body directly flew out and vomited blood. He landed in the distance. No one knew whether he was dead or alive. You even dare to lie to me. If you don't say it, this will be your end. Elder Su shouted. His robes fluttered in the wind. He was already angry. Elder Su, please forgive us. Sui was in the Divine Sword Valley. He was ambushed and killed by Yun Lingfeng on the 15th Sword Peak. These disciples' faces changed greatly. They did not dare to hide it. Immediately after, these disciples reported the general situation to Elder Su in fear and trepidation. After knowing everything, Elder Su's short body had a faint fluctuation of aura. However, he calmed down and asked, Where is Yun Lingfeng now? Has he been punished? Well. Chapter 587. Is that so? He was not punished for deliberately killing a fellow disciple? Elder Su looked very calm, and his eyes were as calm as an ancient well. There was no fluctuation in his aura at all. But for some reason, when they felt that Elder Su was completely calm at this moment, the fear in the hearts of the disciples became more intense. I heard. Several disciples wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Under the suppression of this invisible aura, it was difficult for them to not tell the truth. They were suppressed to the point that their hearts trembled. What did you hear? Elder Su asked calmly. I heard that senior brother Yun Lingfeng got a lot of benefits and will be the future of Xinjiang Gate in the future. So I'm afraid that he won't be punished. A disciple lowered his voice and trembled violently. Yun Lingfeng is the future of Xinjiang Gate, and Sui should die. Is that so? Elder Su sighed softly, and then said to the disciples, You can all go now. Tell the person who sent you here to send back as many people as there were originally on the 36th Sword Peak. As for the other things, I, Suruga, will seek justice. When the last word fell, Elder Su's short figure had disappeared into thin air. Elder Su is back. I'm afraid that something big is going to happen. Go and inform the right guardian. The group of disciples came to their senses after a while. They were still in fear and immediately left to report to the right guardian. They were afraid that something big was going to happen in Xinjiang Gate. The 15th Sword Peak, towering into the clouds, was rich in the energy of heaven and earth. There were exotic flowers and herbs everywhere, as well as rare spiritual birds and beasts. The misty clouds made it look like a fairyland. Elder Su's figure appeared on the 15th Sword Peak out of thin air. Elder Su on the 15th Sword Peak. Someone raised his head and looked at the short figure that appeared directly in the void. Suddenly, his expression changed greatly. These disciples of the 15th Sword Peak did not have a good time during this period. Almost all the personal disciples and inner core disciples of the 15th Sword Peak had been trampled by Su-yi and had become the laughingstock of the entire Xinjiang Gate. The disciples of the 15th Sword Peak had hoped that the Myriad Sword Conference would be able to wash away their shame. However, Yunling Feng's defeat did not allow them to do as they wished. But now, Yunling Feng had obtained countless benefits from the Divine Sword Valley, and had become the #1 person among his peers in the Xinjiang Gate. He was the future of the Xinjiang Gate. This caused the disciples of the 15 Sword Peaks to be like rainbows after the rain. They were finally able to see the bright moon after the clouds and mist were parted. They exhaled and raised their eyebrows, and their faces were basked in the light. In addition to the loss of Su-yi, the disciples of the 15th Sword Peak also heaved a sigh of relief. At least in the future, no one would be able to trample on them. However, the appearance of Elder Su at this moment made these disciples instinctively shudder with fear. Now, in the entire Xinjiang Gate, everyone knew how Su-yi died. Although the gate had sealed off the news, how could it be sealed off when so many people had seen it with their own eyes? On the surface, no one mentioned Su-yi's death, but in private, all the disciples of the Xinjiang Gate knew that Su-yi was deliberately killed by Yunling Feng in the Divine Sword Valley. How could the disciples of the 15th Sword Peak not know why Elder Su had come here? Su-yi was from the 36th Sword Peak, so Elder Su coming to the 15th Sword Peak was definitely not a good thing. Elder Su descended from the sky with a calm expression. "Greetings, Elder Su." Some of the inner disciples trembled, and for some reason, their legs went soft. "Do you know where Yunling Feng is?" Elder Su's gaze swept across the surroundings. His mind had already scanned the surroundings, but he still could not find the person he was looking for. "We don't know." When the disciples of the 15th Sword Peak heard this, they almost collapsed to the ground. When it came to Yunling Feng, they were not fools. They already knew why Elder Su had come here. "Then I'll look for it myself," Elder Su said softly and stepped forward. "Elder Su, this is the 15th Sword Peak. Let's report to Master and ask Elder Su not to barge in recklessly." A direct disciple stood out, summoned his courage, and said while gritting his teeth, Suruga walked around the Xinjiang Gate and it actually became a mess. It seems that the Xinjiang Gate has changed too much recently." Elder Su smiled faintly, and there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. Then his eyes turned cold, and he looked at the disciples of the 15th Sword Peak in front of him and said, "This has nothing to do with you, and you are not qualified to interfere. Back off, I won't say this again." "Elder Su, you are a dignified Elder Su. Why do you have to make things difficult for us, the younger disciples?" "I'll go and inform Master, please wait." A direct disciple who seemed to be the leader gritted his teeth. Facing Elder Su, he was invisibly trembling in his heart. At this moment, he wished he was not here. Puff! Before he could finish his words, the disciple's pupils suddenly shrank. A short figure appeared in front of him without warning, and then he spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body flew out directly. The disciple's body slammed heavily on a rock more than 10 feet away, and he was bleeding and dying. "You are disrespectful to an elder. Your cultivation will be destroyed, and you will leave the Xinjiang Gate in the future." Elder Su's voice fell, and his eyes were filled with coldness. "Coo-coo!" The surrounding disciples immediately retreated in fear, and their hair stood on end. "Elder Su, you came to the 15th Sword Peak and hit a junior so hard. Aren't you afraid of losing your dignity?" Finally, a voice came from the 15th Sword Peak. Then, several figures appeared in the void of the 15th Sword Peak with the sound of wind breaking. There were 9 people in total. 9 figures appeared in the void, and as soon as they appeared, they faced the Suruga elder in a kind of half-encirclement. The 7 old men all had aged faces. One was an old woman, and the other was a middle-aged man. There were 9 people in total. 9 invisible auras filled the air, and the air on the 15th sword peak suddenly seemed to have solidified, making it difficult for people to breathe. Among the 9 people, the figure in the middle was Elder by Mingshan. He looked at the Suruga elder with a gloomy look in his eyes. I'm afraid something big is going to happen. The surrounding disciples all had good eyesight, and under the pressure of the invisible aura, they immediately retreated. With such a situation, it seems that I don't need to investigate anymore. Everything I know should be the truth. The Suruga elder looked up slightly and swept his gaze across the 9 figures in the void. Finally, his gaze fell on Bai Mingshan and said, I'm here to take Yun Lingfeng to the torture chamber. Chapter 588. But Bai Mingshan was already prepared. He had something to rely on. He was emboldened. He looked at Elder Su. He did not beat around the bush and said, Elder Su, from what I know, that Su Yi is not your direct disciple in the Divine Sword Valley. He was unlucky and died while fighting for the supreme benefits. That is his fate. My disciple Ling Feng obtained the supreme benefits left behind by the ancestor. It is the future of our Divine Sword sect. A mistake, and killing Su Yi is nothing compared to the future of our Divine Sword sect, right? Elder Su raised his eyes, his gaze faintly fluctuating. He was silent for a short period of time, causing the 9 people in the air to be puzzled. Ha 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 ha! Suddenly, Elder Su laughed out loud. This sound wave was like endless thunder, causing the entire space and the 15th sword peak to tremble. His voice soared into the heavens and shook the heavens, causing the 9 figures in the sky to have a drastic change in expression. Their bodies trembled and they almost fell down. What's going on? Such a sudden movement was astonishing. The disciples of the 15th sword peak and the surrounding sword peaks all leaped out and looked towards the source of the terrifying aura. Elder Su, what do you mean by this? Elder Bai Mingshan trembled. His expression was extremely miserable and his face was gloomy. However, facing Elder Su, he subconsciously trembled and felt uneasy in his heart. That's right, Elder Su, if you have something to say it slowly. Don't let the younger generation see you as a joke. Elder Su, calm down. If you have something to say it slowly. Elder Su, look at the big picture. Yun Lingfeng obtaining what the ancestor left behind is a supreme benefit, and the future of my Shunjian gate. In the air, the few old men also looked embarrassed as they tried to smooth things over to Elder Su. These people were also elders of the Shunjian gate. They appeared here because they were afraid that Elder Su would cause trouble for the 15th sword peak after he came out of seclusion. If you really wanted to talk nicely, why would you be in such a state right now? So that evil Yun Lingfeng is important, and Su Yi's life is worthless, right? Elder Su's laughter came to an abrupt halt, and a sneer appeared on his face. Who was he? He was the sword Yama Suruga. How could Elder Su not understand what these people were thinking? Some elders were embarrassed, not knowing what to say. Even so, as the elders of Shenzhen Gate, we should focus on the overall situation. I hope Elder Su will also focus on the overall situation. An old man gritted his teeth and suppressed the fear in his heart as he spoke to the Suruga elder. Ha 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 ha! The Suruga elder laughed again. His laughter was like a deafening clap of thunder, echoing in the void and spreading to the entire Shenzhen Gate. Whoosh, whoosh, many figures rushed out of the Shenzhen Gate and looked in the direction of the laughter. Su Yi, your life is really worthless, the Suruga elder laughed. His face was no longer calm, and his eyes gradually became dazzling. There were waves of void around him, and his voice continued to spread. All juniors, leave quickly, or you will be killed without mercy. Such a voice was sonorous and deafening, and it made people's hair stand on end for no reason. Go quickly! The disciples on the 15th sword peak trembled and felt uneasy, as if something bad was about to happen. Go quickly, all juniors, go quickly! In the void, some elders' faces changed greatly, and they all shouted. They knew that the thing they were most afraid of was about to happen. Elder Su, if you have something to say it slowly. This was originally an accident. If you want to blame someone, then blame Su-yi for not living long. The bigger picture is more important. An elder tried to smooth things over, trying to persuade Elder Su to calm down. You think that Su-yi's life is worthless, not as good as Yunlingfeng's, but I don't think so. His life was saved by me, Suruga. I brought him back to the Xinjian Gate, and he received the badge in the Xinjian Gate, so he is a disciple of the Xinjian Gate. You think that his life is worthless, but I don't think so. Hand over Yunlingfeng, and I will take him to the torture hall and punish him according to the sect rules. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude today. The old Suruga elder's face was full of anger. His aura fluctuated and his robe fluttered. His voice echoed on the 15th sword peak like thunder. Elder Su, you have to consider the big picture. Su-yi is already dead. And Elder Su persuaded Elder Su. That's right. Su-yi is already dead. So what if he's dead? That's why you've placed so many people here. You want to kill me too? The Suruga elder laughed angrily, but there was a touch of sadness in his laughter. Elder Su, you are too serious. We are just afraid that Elder Su will not be calm, so we hope to calm down Elder Su, an elder said. An elder spoke like this, his gaze evasive. They had always stayed on the 15th sword peak precisely because they feared that Elder Su would take revenge. At that time, it would be easier to suppress them. What kind of person was Elder Su? Back then, he was a peerless talent. His name shook the central state and spread across the whole continent. After the accident, he was also the Sword Yama. His fierce reputation made everyone tremble in fear. How could they not see his true nature? You are full of bullshit. It seems that the Xinjian Gate is no longer the same as before. No one takes me, Suruga, seriously. Today you even want to kill me, Suruga. What a pity, what a pity! The Suruga elder laughed. His words were spread with a touch of sadness and loneliness. Elder Su, you are too serious. If there is anything, you can go to the sect leader. The 15th sword peak is not a place to be trespassed. Elder Bai Mingshan said. At this point, he did not hide anymore. He suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and regained some calmness. After all, there were 9 elders here. No matter how powerful the sword Yama Suruga was, he could not overturn the sky. Trespassing? I, Suruga, am trespassing in the Xinjian Gate. Elder Su raised his eyes and looked at the 9 people in the void. He said, if that is the case, then I will give it a try. Boom. When the last word was said, a strong and fierce aura spread out from Elder Su's body like a dragon that was awakened from a deep sleep. Those who block me will die. At this moment, Elder Su was completely enraged. His voice was like thunder as he took a step forward. The edition premiere A mountain-like aura erupted from Elder Su Kuanga's short figure. His eyes seemed to have a divine sword light flashing in them, causing one's heart to tremble with fear at first glance. Suruga, don't be too arrogant. Elder Bai Mingshan shouted. This was his 15th sword peak. How could he let it be trespassed like this? He could not take it anymore. He had something to rely on. His figure pounced down from the void like lightning. A bright palm print condensed in his hand and slammed directly at Elder Su. When I was arrogant, you, Bai Mingshan, were still wearing diapers. Who do you think you are? Elder Su shouted angrily. His short and small figure suddenly appeared in the air. With a shake of his arm, he threw out a punch to meet the attack. Bang! Chapter 589. Boom! The ground shook and dust flew into the air. Cracks appeared on the ground where Elder Bai Mingshan landed, and he spat out blood. Whoever dares to stop me, I won't show any mercy next time. At this moment, Elder Su Kwanga stood proudly at a low altitude. Around his short figure, Yuan Qi whistled like a hurricane. The surrounding sky was also trembling, causing the remaining 8 divine sword sect elders' complexions to greatly change. The former's terrifying strength was undoubtedly revealed at this moment. It was incomparably terrifying. The remaining 8 elders sucked in a breath of cold air as their expressions changed drastically. They knew how terrifying the Suruga elder was, which was why they had so many people around. However, they couldn't help but tremble under such a powerful attack. Elder Bai Mingshan struggled to get up. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth, and his face turned red and purple. He looked at the Suruga elder in the air, and his eyes were bloodshot. He clenched his fists tightly, and they made cracking sound. Set up the formation. Finally, Elder Bai Mingshan was enraged. He couldn't take it anymore after being humiliated again and again. His cold voice was like a sharp sword as it came out from the gaps of his teeth. As Elder Bai Mingshan's voice fell, the 8 elders looked at each other secretly, and their figures instantly flew out. The figures of the 8 elders floated around in the void. The 8 figures were faintly connected to each other in a mysterious trajectory and position. 9-star sword formation. The 8 elders flew into the air and stood in their respective positions. 8 loud shouts came out. Boom! Suddenly, Yuan Qi of different elements surged out from the 8 elders' bodies. A treasure sword floated in front of each of them, and they emitted sword radiances. Finally, they connected with each other. Wung wung. The sword radiances were thunderous, and the sound was deafening. The 8 treasure swords emitted 8 dazzling sword radiances, and they intersected with each other. Whoosh! At the same time, Elder Bai Mingshan flew into the sky and stood in the middle of the formation. A treasure sword floated in front of him, and its radiance filled the sky, connecting with the 8 treasure swords. In an instant, the surrounding space was distorted. The endless sword light was dazzling, and the sky was rumbling and trembling. Suddenly, a huge sword formation appeared in the void and solidified. It enveloped the surrounding void and was filled with an extremely sharp and terrifying aura. 9-star sword formation, that's the 9-star sword formation. In the distance, the disciples of Xinjian Gate trembled. The 9-star sword formation was one of the great sword formations of Xinjian Gate. It had great power. Now that it was being controlled by several elders, its aura was even more terrifying. Ha 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 ha, the 9-star sword formation is really well prepared. The Suruga elder laughed loudly, his laughter mixed with unparalleled rage. These people had long planned to deal with him. They had even prepared the 9 stars sword formation. Suruga, you are too presumptuous. Elder Bai Mingshan swept his gaze across Elder Su Kwanga, who was enveloped by the sword light. A cold glint flickered in his eyes as he formed a seal with his hand. Driving the sword array, he charged towards Elder Su Kwanga. 9-star sword break. The 9 swords were shining brightly. Together with the 9 figures, they descended from the sky in the direction of the 9 stars. It was as if the 9 stars were collapsing, communicating with the energy of heaven and earth. The 9-star sword formation originated from the 9 stars of heaven and earth. It was rumored that it was researched by an ancestor of Xinjian Gate, and it had shocking power. The 9-star sword formation was much more powerful when the 9 of them worked together. The 9-star sword formation of Xinjian Gate was famous in the entire continent. Especially in Zhongzhou, many experts had been killed by the 9-star sword formation. The sword formation was collapsing. The 9 elders exerted their strength together. 9 sword lights that were like huge stars fell, causing the wind to blow and the clouds to surge. The sky rumbled and shook one's soul. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Wherever the sword lights passed, even the void would be cut open. It was as if they were going to destroy everything. The 15th sword peak seemed to have been set up. Otherwise, under such a terrifying aura, the mountain would have collapsed and the earth would have cracked. It would have been destroyed into ruins. But even so, the entire 15th Sword Peak was shaking and roaring at the moment like an earthquake. In the face of such a terrifying attack, the Suruga elder was furious, but his expression was not too serious at the moment. He just raised his eyebrows slightly. In an instant, the Suruga elder did not retreat. Instead, he rushed out and shuttled among the 9 star-like sword lights. It was unbelievably strange. Then, a bright sword light came out of the Suruga elder's hand. It was unknown where it came from, but the sound of the sword was like thunder. Buzz! Let's hurry up and get on with it. A lightning-like sword light pierced through space and collided with one of the sword lights on the 9-star sword formation. Boom! On the 15th Sword Peak, the terrifying wind and sword light suddenly exploded like a volcanic eruption. The 9 streaks of star-like sword light shattered inch by inch and exploded in the void. You want to deal with me? I'm afraid it's not enough. Get down. At the same time, the Suruga elder's thunderous roar came from the dazzling and chaotic void. The void trembled as streaks of sword light shot up into the sky, shooting out in all directions. Terrifying sword waves spread out. Blood rained down and spurted out. 8 figures flew out from the void and spat out mouthfuls of blood. Sword wounds appeared on the 8 figures. They were so deep that their bones could be seen. Their skin was torn open and their flesh was bleeding. Then, the 8 figures fell down and landed at various places below the 15th Sword Peak. The ground shook and the mountains shook. I have a much deeper understanding of the 9-star sword formation than you. With your strength, you'll only embarrass the Xinjian Gate. A bunch of trash. The void regained its vision and the light dissipated. The Suruga elder shouted coldly. His face was fierce and his eyes were like sharp sword lights. A claw appeared in front of him and grabbed Elder Bai Mingshan's left shoulder. Elder Bai Mingshan was held in his hand like a chick. Countless figures appeared in the distance. They were dumbfounded when they saw the scene in the void. The short figure was like a king of hell that could destroy everything. It made people's hair stand on end. Suruga, what are you trying to do? The gate won't let you get away with this. Elder Bai Mingshan was terrified when he was held in the hands of the Suruga elder like a chick. There were many sword wounds on his body and blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Bai Mingshan did not expect the Suruga elder's strength to be so terrifying. It was completely beyond his imagination. The 9-star sword formation of the 9 of them could not deal with the Suruga elder. It was terrifying. Tell me where Yunling Feng is. Otherwise, even if I kill you, so what? The Suruga elder shouted. Killing intent flashed in his eyes. His voice was infused with Yuan Qi and rushed into Elder Bai Mingshan's ears. It was deafening. Chapter 590. A sneak attack? Since when did the Xinjian Gate learn how to sneak around? At this moment, Elder Su suddenly roared and threw Bai Mingshan to the left like a javelin. Whoosh! The void rippled and an old figure appeared out of nowhere. He looked at Bai Mingshan's figure and frowned. Light exploded from his body and a gentle force tried to wrap around him. Whoosh! But at this moment the Suruga elder arrived. His palm was covered with a layer of crystal light. A dazzling and sharp palm print slammed towards Bai Mingshan's back, as if he wanted to kill Bai Mingshan directly. Cunning and ruthless. If the former wanted to avoid it, Bai Mingshan would be killed directly. The former could not avoid it unless he watched as Bai Mingshan was killed. The name, Sword Yama, was revealed at this moment. The figure looked up and his expression changed drastically. His gaze turned ugly and he had no choice but to give up on Bai Mingshan. His figure flashed past and a palm print exploded with a brilliant light to meet the attack. Bang! The 2 palm prints collided in the void. A powerful primordial chi storm swept out and spread to a certain distance before quietly disappearing. Bang! Elder Bai Mingshan's figure fell to the ground and rushed into the mountain. The ground shook and the mountain shook. Rocks shattered and he was buried in dust. No one knew if he was dead or alive. In the void, the figure that suddenly appeared. He was pushed back dozens of feet in the void before stabilizing his body. He looked old and his face was full of wrinkles. He had gray-white hair and a gray-white robe. But the eyes on his face were like stars shining brightly. No one dared to look directly at him. "First Elder!" someone exclaimed. It was the first Elder of the Xinjian Gate. He had actually appeared. But from the situation of the battle just now, he could not stop Elder Su. "Elder Su, why do you have to do this? It is a joyous occasion that a disciple has obtained the supreme benefits left by the Patriarch." The first Elder's voice was faint, and his expression was not particularly good. There was a hint of fear in his eyes as he looked at Elder Su. Judging from the situation just now, Su Kuanga's strength was beyond his imagination. "Bullshit, the disciple of my 15th Sword Peak was killed, and it became a joyous occasion. Now you even dare to kill me. Since when did you have the right to call the shots in Xinjian Gate?" The Suruga Elder looked at the first Elder and said in a deep voice, "Elder Su, no one wants to kill Elder Su. It's just that they were afraid that Elder Su wouldn't be calm enough, so they had no choice but to do so." The great Elder said, his face twitching, reversing yin and yang, confusing black and white. "Today, I will not be polite to anyone who tries to stop me from capturing Yunlingfeng," Elder Su said sternly. His hair and robe were fluttering in the wind, adding to his domineering aura. "Elder Su, there's no need for that, to you. To stop to. To stop to, you want to stop me? Fine. Let's see how much you have improved over the years." As Elder Su's voice fell, his figure flashed across the sky like a flash of lightning. In the first Elder's eyes, a fierce claw print came crashing down. Yama's claw. The first Elder's face changed. The Yuan Qi of the fire attribute on his body fluctuated rapidly, as if covering his body with a layer of Yuan Qi light shield. A vast and vigorous Qi spread out, causing the surrounding void to tremble. A fist print immediately met the attack. Qi La. When the fist print broke through the air, the claw print of the Suruga Elder suddenly collapsed inch by inch and was directly smashed to pieces. Afterimage. At this moment, the first Elder's face suddenly changed. There was a trace of panic in his eyes and he quickly retreated. UJ cool, a net genuine $1 send, but it was too late. A claw print appeared beside him and fell toward his right shoulder. "The power of space, you have reached such a level," the first Elder exclaimed in shock. There was a trace of real fear in his eyes. On his shoulder, it was as if all the Yuan Qi of his body had accumulated there. In an instant, above the first Elder's shoulder, there was a shield of light that was filled with high-temperature red flames. At this moment, the small void above the first Elder's shoulder was distorting. There was a sizzling smoke in the air, as if to burn this small void. Qi-la. The claw print fell on the first Elder's shoulder and was blocked by the red flame light shield. The high-temperature red flame burned everything, causing the light of the former's claw print to dim. "My crimson flame shield is not that easy to break." There was a hint of joy in the first Elder's eyes. His red flame shield was not easy to break. "Do you think my Yama's claw is only this?" The Suruga Elder's eyes were filled with disdain, a cold light flashing out. When his voice fell, from the Suruga Elder's claw print, a bloody light suddenly surged out strangely. An incomparably vast force, along with a frightening baleful aura, suddenly erupted. Kaka, the crimson flame shield, which seemed to have blocked Elder Su Kuanga's Yama's claws, suddenly collapsed and cracked at this moment. Elder Su's claw print also collapsed on the first Elder's shoulder. "Not good." the first elder exclaimed and quickly retreated. The aura of his body was no longer exposed and poured out in torrents. The terrifying aura swept through half of the void, shaking the earth and shaking the entire Shunjian gate. Chi-la-la, the first elder retreated, but he was one step too late. His shoulder was affected, leaving a large piece of flesh and blood. "Ah!" the first elder screamed. A large piece of flesh on his shoulder was directly scratched open. The flesh was badly mutilated, the bones were ghastly, and blood kept flowing. Puff, spitting out blood, the first elder was defeated and retreated in panic. The eyes of the surrounding people trembled. So many elders, including the great elder, appeared, but they were all so weak that they couldn't even withstand a single blow. Elder Su's strength was too terrifying. The elders that were sent flying on the mountain peak also climbed up. They were all in a terrible state and were covered in blood. Elder Bai Mingshan did not die. He climbed out of the debris and looked the most miserable. His hair was disheveled, and his face was as pale as ash. Blood flowed everywhere, and his left arm was directly crushed from the shoulder. Only a few pieces of flesh were left connecting it. This arm was as good as being chopped off. This seemed to be done by the Suruga elder on purpose. When he sent Elder Bai Mingshan flying, he did not kill him, but destroyed one of his arms. The pain of losing his arm made Elder Bai Mingshan groan and scream. On his pale face, he looked at the Suruga elder in the void with hatred. "It seems that you have not made much progress in these years. Trash like you only know how to eliminate the dissident. You can't tolerate that brat Su-yi, and that's why Xinjian Gate has not been able to prosper. The supreme benefits left by the ancestor are useless in your hands." "What a joke!" the Suruga elder shouted. His voice was like thunder, reverberating through the entire Xinjian Gate. The first elder and the other elders present all had their faces twitching. Their faces were pale and green, and they were all filled with fear. "Since you still don't plan to come out, then I will really kill your disciples and granddisciples. Let's see how long you can endure." Chapter 591. Boom! As his voice faded, Elder Su struck out with his palm. The Yuan Qi light on his palm flickered and drew upon the energy of heaven and earth, causing the void to distort as he struck down at the 15th sword peak. Boom! A mighty aura suddenly appeared and crushed a large part of the void. The Yuan Qi in the bodies of the figures on the 15th sword peak immediately froze. All the disciples on the 15th sword peak seemed to have been imprisoned and were unable to move. For no reason, their hearts began to palpitate and fear crept into their hearts. "Little junior brother, the anger in your heart should be enough. Everything has already happened. Calm down." Such a voice suddenly rang out from the depths of the void. At the same time, an old figure appeared in front of Elder Su out of thin air. The old man had an old face and a deep gaze. His aged face was clearly old, but it made others feel that he was still very young, as if he was still in his prime. It was extremely strange. When such a voice appeared, the invisible suppressive force on the 15th sword peak quietly dissipated by more than half. Looking at the old man who had suddenly appeared, the fear in the eyes of the miserable elder Bai Mingshan and the others also surged with hope. The figure of the person who had arrived flashed and did not stop. His seemingly slow speed had arrived in an instant. A palm print that was accompanied by a ripple that caused the air to tremble faintly resounded with the sound of wind and thunder as it collided with Elder Su's palm print. Chi! The collision of the two palm prints did not produce the earth-shattering sound that everyone had expected. Instead, two rays of bright Yuan Qi light shot out like fireworks and dissipated in the sky. The two figures did not move at all. They stood in the void and faced each other. The newcomer was dressed in a plain robe and his figure was slender and thin. An invisible aura spread out from him, as if a layer of white light had enveloped him. It was as if rings of light were circling around him. It was as if a huge star had fallen and his aura was vast and mighty. The old man's deep eyes were suffused with a bright white light. He looked at Elder Sue and smiled. "Congratulations, little junior brother. You have made amazing progress over the years. From the looks of it, you are indeed their backing." Elder Sue looked at the newcomer, as if he already knew who he was. The aura around his short stature was no less than the former's. He said indifferently, "I also want to see how eldest senior brother has improved over the years." Before he finished speaking, Elder Su Kwanga's eyes were sharp. His figure broke through the air and he waved his arm. A palm print that contained a vast and mighty aura, accompanied by the rapid trembling of the void, furiously slammed towards the white-robed old man. "Little junior brother, why do you have to do this?" Seeing the Suruga elder, the white-robed elder's face darkened. He waved his hand and a bright fingerprint collided with the Suruga elder's palm print at lightning speed. When the two collided, a muffled sound rang out in the air. High up in the sky, a dazzling light shrouded the void, making it difficult to see what was going on. There was an aura that sealed everything, preventing the strong wind from spreading out. Otherwise, the aftermath of this force would be enough to raze the surroundings to the ground. "Little junior brother, since you are so considerate, I will accompany you today." In the depths of the sky, the white-robed elder's figure could be vaguely seen. It seemed that the white-robed elder did not have any advantage just now. At this moment, the white-robed elder's fighting spirit was aroused. His figure appeared in front of the Suruga elder like a ghost. There was a burst of light and a vast aura. "Let's fight." "Why are you talking nonsense?" the Suruga elder shouted. The light around his body whistled, and he immediately engaged in a fierce battle with the former. Bang bang bang, the entire Shinjian gate was shaken. Countless gazes looked up. They could only see light erupting from the depths of the void. The aura was vast and mighty, and the sound of wind and thunder was constantly heard. There didn't seem to be much fanciful in the battle between the two experts. Every move they made was clean and neat. The two figures constantly collided with each other. It was fierce and direct. "That's Elder Su fighting with someone. He's too strong. That's a supreme elder. His cultivation and strength have already reached an extremely terrifying level." Cool Craftsman Network Unspecified Currency J Forever Free *. Read VX Novel ZJ. Su Yi was killed by Yunling Feng. Elder Su is angry. He wants to capture Yunling Feng to settle the score. It seems that the Supreme Elder wants to protect Master Yunling Feng. The gazes below were trembling. That kind of battle fascinated everyone. Around the void, many experts and elders appeared. They stood together and watched the battle in the depths of the void. Their eyes were even more solemn. Yu Chongqing, Mei Huaya, Shangguan Hu, and other familiar elders looked at the depths of the void. They frowned, but there was a refreshing feeling. This scene seemed to be within their expectations. On the sky sword peak, Situ Liuyan's figure looked at the depths of the void. His long robe fluttered as he sighed softly. "Rumble?" In the depths of the void there were continuous rumbles. The two figures were constantly fighting. Chi La, the white-robed elder, was shrouded in brilliance. His figure crossed the void and stretched out his palm. A great power of distortion surged and shrouded the Suruga elder, trying to suppress him. Chi. The Suruga elder stomped his foot. A fierce aura swept out. His figure broke free from the power of distortion and rushed out like lightning. At the same time, behind the Suruga elder, vitality surged. A looming huge and ferocious shadow appeared out of thin air. It was like a dragon or a flood dragon. It crossed the void and filled the air with demonic aura. Ao! Faintly, there was the sound of a dragon's roar. A terrible pressure suddenly descended from the void. The terrible power descended in an indescribable way. It made those who were not strong enough tremble. Their bodies went limp and their souls throbbed. The white-robed elder's expression changed. He seemed to be very surprised. He quickly formed hand seals. Behind him, there was a large amount of bright light gushing out. Vaguely, a ferocious beast appeared and collided with the light. Rumble, heaven and earth roared. The muffled sound was like thunder. It rumbled and resounded in the void, making countless eyes tremble. In the void there was chaos, and then it gradually calmed down. Two figures were clearly visible. They both retreated. It seemed that neither of them had gained any advantage. Junior brother's talent is still so outstanding. I really didn't expect it. The white-robed elder's expression was no longer as calm as before. His eyes began to turn gloomy. You talk too much nonsense. Today, if you want to protect your disciples, it depends on how strong you are. The Suruga elder did not mean to talk nonsense. He was really angry. His eyes were cold. The aura around his body surged. His figure tore through the space at an extremely terrifying speed and appeared in front of the white-robed elder in an instant. He waved his hand and turned it into a claw. It directly crushed the white-robed elder. Chila. Chapter 592. Junior brother, don't blame me for being impolite. The white-robed elder shouted. His eyes turned cold as he stretched out his hand. Using his hand as a sword light shot out from his hand. Sky-splitting sword finger. The sword light expanded in the wind like a thunderbolt. The dazzling light pulsed and cut through the void sharply. Whoosh, the two collided. Instantly, violent energy swept out and the surrounding void ripples were shattered. I'd like to see if you have the strength to protect your disciples today. The Suruga elder shouted and rushed out again. A low whistling sound broke through the wind and a mighty aura swept out. He rushed out at a speed faster than the naked eye and threw a punch. Facing Elder Su's seemingly relentless attacks, the white-robed elder frowned secretly. There was a strange fluctuation of aura on his body. Boom! The Suruga elder's punch landed directly on the white-robed elder. However, in an instant, the white-robed elder's figure was shattered into pieces. Residual shadow. The Suruga elder's eyes darkened. His pupils constricted and his body retreated almost at the same time. There was a dazzling light suddenly enveloping his body. Chi. At this moment, the figure of the white-robed elder suddenly appeared in the void above Elder Su Kwanga's head. A cold voice immediately sounded. Junior brother, don't forget that you're inferior to me in terms of speed. Whoosh 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 whoosh. When the white-robed elder said this, he used his hand as a sword. Suddenly, a large amount of sword light broke through the air like a large sword net and directly enveloped the Suruga elder. Streaks of sword light fell on Elder Su Kwanga's head like an overwhelming force. Every sword light was as fast as lightning and enveloped the Suruga elder. The terrifying aura pierced through the space. Not bad, you're indeed faster than me. Unfortunately, facing the descending sword light that was as fast as lightning, the Suruga smiled faintly. Suddenly, the Suruga elder quietly formed a handprint in his hand. A strange energy fluctuation came from his body and spread out in all directions like ripples in water. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. When the sword light that fell from the sky touched the energy fluctuation that spread out from the Suruga's body, a strange scene occurred. The sword light that pierced through the space disappeared in a strange way. It disappeared directly into the space without leaving a trace. Break! Elder Su Kwanga let out a loud roar as he swept his sleeves. The sword light that shrouded the area immediately shattered and quietly disappeared. This is the so-called speed, Elder Su Kwanga said coldly. At this moment, the aura on his body became more and more terrifying. It was overbearing and terrifying. You've actually comprehended to this step, the white-robed elder's expression changed. And astonishment in his eyes, but he quickly returned to normal. The gazes below were cold, all of them trembling because of this. The battle between these two terrifying experts had reached this step. This kind of strength was beyond their reach. It turned out that the experts were so terrifying. Above the void, a large amount of invisible light that distorted the void rose and sealed the void, isolating it from all energy. Otherwise, the entire 15th sword peak would have been destroyed long ago. If you want to protect your disciples and grand disciples today, show me your true strength. The Suruga elder said again. The primordial chi on his body rippled with a soul-shaking aura. There was a domineering divine power that came from the inside out of his short body. The terrifying power made the countless people below tremble even through the distorted void. Elder Su was so terrifying. Okay, as you wish, junior brother. The white-robed old man spoke. When his voice fell, the surrounding space tore through the air and surged with wind and clouds, causing a large expanse of dazzling light to soar. With him as the center, an unparalleled aura erupted and surged through the sky. It seems that he's really going all out. Cool Craftsman JR Network J Forever as free reading novels, looking at the movement in the void, Yu Chongqing, Shangguan Hu, and the other elders in the distance looked extremely solemn. Like Elder Su, they were also elders in charge of their respective sword peaks. However, with Elder Su's strength, they were not even able to be affected, let alone participate in it. Elder Su is actually so powerful. Elder Su seems to have entered the sect more than 100 years later than that person, but they're actually on par. An elder whispered to himself. His eyes were filled with shock. Only then did he know Elder Su's true strength. For no reason, the atmosphere in the depths of the sky was tense. Even though they were far away in the void, everyone could feel the fluctuations of the peak confrontation between the two of them. Boom! The mighty primordial chi in the body of the Suruga elder stirred up the energy of heaven and earth. It began to boil, and the surrounding void began to distort. The plain-robed old man's plain robe fluttered in the wind. His gaze was like lightning, and a buzzing sound resounded from his body. It was like a thunderstorm that caused the wind to rise and the clouds to surge. Everyone held their breath and waited. Everyone knew that these two experts were going to really fight with all their strength. Haven't you messed around enough? I have something to say. Suddenly, just as the atmosphere was extremely tense, an old voice faintly sounded. The voice was not loud, but it resounded clearly in the void. Hearing this, the white-robed elder and the Suruga elder in the void were moved. At the same time, they bowed towards a certain direction in the void. Swoosh, swoosh, the two figures immediately broke through the void and left, disappearing above the void. Everything was over too quickly. After the two figures disappeared, everything in the void calmed down. Everyone was stunned and tongue-tied. Sigh, on the sky sword peak, Sidu Luyun sighed and frowned slightly. Time passed quietly. The shocking battle that day had immersed the entire Xinjiang Gate in an inexplicably tense atmosphere. Such powerful strength. I don't know if we will have the chance to reach that level in the future. You still want to reach Elder Su's level? Do you know how peerless Elder Su was back then? I heard that Elder Su was also a peerless handsome man back then. However, there was a huge change, and that was why he suffered such a huge change. However, his strength is still so terrifying. In addition, the one who fought Elder Su was a supreme elder, who is also Elder Su's senior brother. He is also Yun Lingfeng's grandmaster. Yun Lingfeng has such a strong background. No wonder he dared to take the opportunity to kill Su Yi. Elder Su was really angry because of Su Yi's death. One of Elder Bai Mingshan's arms was crippled. In the Xinjiang Gate, all the disciples were discussing in private. Chapter 593. Being removed from the sacred martial assembly and facing the wall for 3 years, what kind of punishment is this? It's clearly just for show. It seems that the higher-ups of the gate will definitely side with Yunlingfeng. Elder Su can't compete with them. Sui is too monstrous. In time, he will be able to become famous in the world. Unfortunately, the heavens are jealous of geniuses. After all, Yunlingfeng has obtained great benefits and is the future of the Xinjian Gate. No matter how talented Sui is, he will die prematurely. Naturally, they will side with Yunlingfeng. When the news of Yunlingfeng's punishment spread, all the disciples in the Xinjian Gate were whispering and fighting for justice. It is said that the sacred martial assembly is not simple. All the forces in the central state will participate. If one can achieve something in the sacred martial assembly, it will be enough to become famous in the world. Yunlingfeng has been removed from the sacred martial assembly and lost the opportunity to become famous in the world. What is the sacred martial assembly? The sacred martial assembly is a grand event for the younger generation in the central state. Young people under the age of 25 can participate. It is a great opportunity for the disciples of the major forces in the central state to perform. The sacred martial assembly will become famous overnight. Those who perform well will be able to enter the sacred mountain to cultivate for a period of time. This is a great opportunity. Will the younger generation of the sacred mountain also participate? When the news of the sacred martial assembly spread, it attracted the attention of all the younger generation. It was a grand event for the younger generation in the central state. In the mysterious and strange void space, no one spied on anything and no one knew. Inside the dazzling light cocoon, Su Yi's body was completely covered in red light. Su Yi's pierced heart was completely corroded and melted bit by bit. It was completely cracked and destroyed. FN starter Walala. The mysterious life force that originally covered Su Yi's heart couldn't stop the destruction of the red light at all. Even the mysterious life force was destroyed. Within the destructive red light, there seemed to be a strange energy that connected Su Yi's shattered heart together. It made Su Yi's heart seem to have been destroyed, but in reality, it was shattered but not scattered, cracked but not separated. Walala! After an unknown amount of time, Su Yi's heart seemed to have turned into a ball of fire. The high temperature spread throughout his body. The crimson fire seemed to want to burn everything, including Su Yi's body, into ashes. Under this terrifying red light, even the dazzling light cocoon on Su Yi's body was gradually destroyed by the red light. An all-pervasive scarlet light spread from Su Yi's heart to his entire body. The blazing heat seemed to be able to burn some parts of his body. Su Yi seemed to have sunk into a state of silence, as if he had lost consciousness. However, the heart-burning pain and the excruciating pain of burning his entire body still caused Su Yi's body to twitch incessantly. What the hell is this? This aura. This is a great opportunity. Where did this kid come from? A faint voice resounded in this space. There was shock, fear, and also great surprise. A great opportunity. This is an unparalleled benefit. The faint voice was filled with unconcealable joy. Layers of mysterious life force radiance began to emanate from the depths of Su Yi's body. Even though they were being burned by the crimson fire, they were endless, as if they were endless. Su Yi's entire heart had already turned into a sea of fire. It was as if his heart had been dug out and turned into ashes. This kind of pain was heart-wrenching. It was definitely the most terrifying training in the world. If it was an ordinary person, it would have been enough to kill him. Sizzle, Su Yi's heart was constantly emitting a sizzling smoke. His entire heart was completely enveloped by the crimson fire. Human kid, I've saved half of your life again. I've helped you thoroughly, and I've also received unparalleled benefits from you. Are we destined to be entangled in this life? The faint voice resounded softly. Then, it returned to calmness. Only the endless vitality radiance spread out from Su Yi's body and rushed to his heart. Although it couldn't stop the crimson fire from burning, it could still protect him. It poured vitality into Su Yi's heart continuously. No one else could see it. Otherwise, they would definitely be dumbfounded. Although Su Yi's heart was broken and didn't scatter, it was still very dangerous. If he wasn't careful, he would directly turn into ashes. However, this mysterious vitality radiance was secretly protecting Su Yi's heart. Yin Talisman Yang Fire, uprooting the roots of heaven and entering the moon cave. Breaking through the chaos and picking up millet pearls. Using yin and yang and the 5 elements to create all things, Qi is the spirit of all things. Beginning with it and end with it. There is no golden liquid Huandan Dao. If you want to cultivate the great Dao of heavenly yang, you have to give up yin and yang. It's easy to lose and hard to find. The golden liquid Huandan Dao is the heavenly yang, the Dao of pre-celestial. The Dao of pre-celestial encompasses heaven and earth. It moves the heavenly yang and is related to the secrets of heaven and earth. Therefore, it can avoid life and death and avoid reincarnation. It can leave the mortal world and enter the saint foundation. In a daze, Su Yi's mouth seemed to be mumbling something. His body was already sitting cross-legged on the cracked ancient stone platform. Occasionally, handprints would condense in his hands. As time passed, Su Yi's heart seemed to have completely shattered. The bright red flesh and the crimson fire fused together and condensed into a new heart. This heart became a little different. It was still beating, sonorous and powerful. However, it was a ball the size of a fist. It was bright red and bright like a small sun, releasing dazzling radiance. The crimson light in the mysterious space in Su Yi's mind was still spreading. It flowed through his limbs and bones, and the crimson light fluctuated. Most importantly, the scarlet light poured into Su Yi's new heart, refining it and reshaping it. It was as if a stronger seed had been planted, and a stronger life force had been injected into it, causing it to take root and sprout. It made Su Yi's new heart flourish like the sun rising from the east. It moved like a new life. Finally, Su Yi's body stopped convulsing. It seemed that he had completely passed through the heart-wrenching training. The mysterious life force had also disappeared. Su Yi sat cross-legged. His whole body was glowing. He was completely immersed in a mysterious state. The robe on his body had turned into ashes. Su Yi was naked. His body was covered in a golden radiance. However, it was crystal clear like a beautiful jade. All of his injuries had been healed. In this mysterious space, time was meaningless. It was very quiet. No one came to disturb him. Chapter 594. Su Yi's heart was like a small sun suspended in the air. It was bright red and dazzling. It was connected to his flesh and blood. It was exuberant, full of vigor and vitality. In the void, the light was bright and dazzling. Su Yi sat cross-legged, exuding a holy and flawless aura. His naked body was flawless. At this moment, Su Yi's aura also began to rise, whistling and surging. Time passed in the outside world. Half a month had passed in a flash. In the calm void, many ferocious birds spread their wings and streaked across the void. The first ferocious bird spread its wings for dozens of feet. Several figures sat cross-legged on it. No matter how the surrounding air whistled, they remained motionless like boulders. Even their hair and robes did not flutter in the slightest. The Shenzhen Gate is just ahead. I heard that there are many talented juniors in the Shenzhen Gate this time. Some of them are half-demon, some are heaven-grade talents, and some have obtained the supreme benefits left by the ancestors of the Shenzhen Gate. We can pay more attention to them when the time comes. Someone spoke. His gaze was deep. His voice resounded in the void where the birds spread their wings and entered everyone's ears clearly. On the ferocious bird, an old man in his 50s sat cross-legged. He was dressed in a long robe with a pattern embroidered on his shoulder like a badge. It seemed to represent some kind of identity or status. The old man's slender face seemed to be thinking about something at this moment. His eyes flickered with an uncertain light. At this moment, if Sui was here, he would be able to recognize that this person was none other than Guardian Wang Chuanda, who was sent by the sacred mountain to the barbarian city. He was also the one who pushed Sui down the cliff. Sui. Is it just the same name? Wang Chuanda muttered to himself. He had forgotten such a name. He was just an ant and had never remembered it in his heart. But recently, there was news from Xinjiang Gate that Suyi's name had accidentally reached Wang Chuanda's ears. The champion of the Xinjiang Gate's Myriad Sword Conference had stepped onto the 7th floor of the Xinjiang Gate's heaven-reaching platform, and he seemed to be around the same age. This made Wang Chuanda suddenly think of that ant from back then. This time, Wang Chuanda joined the team at Xinjiang Gate because he wanted to see for himself whether Sui was the ant he had killed before. But when Wang Chuanda thought about it, he also felt that it was impossible. How could an ant with the qualification of a handyman become the number one of the younger generation in Xinjiang Gate in such a short time? It should be a coincidence that they share the same name. However, despite having such thoughts, Wang Chuanda still decided to come and see for himself. Whoosh whoosh, 7 in front of Xinjiang Gate, there was the sound of wind breaking as many flying savage beasts came from afar. Situ Luyun, Elder Yu Chongqing, Elder Shangguan Hu, and many other elders and experts of Xinjiang Gate personally appeared in front of Xinjiang Gate. They looked into the distance as if they were waiting for something. The people from Sacred Mountain must have come for something. They said that they were here to discuss the Sacred Martial Arts Conference. I guess they want to find out the truth and act according to the situation. Situ Luyun looked into the distance and said softly. The experts and elders of Xinjiang Gate nodded and frowned. The people from Sacred Mountain probably didn't come just to discuss the Sacred Martial Arts Conference. In the strange space, time passed slowly. Sui stood still as a red light lingered around his body. Faintly, one could see Suyi's chest moving up and down with a special rhythm. It was neither fast nor slow, but sonorous and powerful. If one listened carefully, it sounded like the beating of a heavenly drum. It was very mysterious and strange. It seemed that every time Suyi's chest moved, the strange space would tremble along with it. Boom! A new aura spread out from Suyi's body and sword until it reached the 7th level of Origin Spirit stage. Only then did it stop. At a certain moment, Suyi's aura calmed down and he opened his eyes. A red light flickered in his eyes before it calmed down. Looking at the dark space around him, Sui seemed to be in a daze. He then closed his eyes and probed his body with his soul strength. After a while, Suyi's eyes moved. There was surprise in his eyes, but more than that, there was a trace of pleasant surprise. Sui was shocked. His heart had turned into a round ball, like a small sun. It was filled with an ancient and blazing aura, beating sonorous and powerful. It was full of vitality and boundless vitality. At this moment, the aura of his cultivation had reached the 7th level of Origin Spirit stage. Ha 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 ha! Then Sui laughed, laughing happily. Mixed Yuan demon body, heart of heavenly sun, I have to thank Yunling Feng. Suyi's laughter came to a halt as he recalled everything. Yunling Feng had taken the opportunity to stab him with a sword. It was a divine weapon left behind by Xinjiang Gate's old ancestor. It was incomparably terrifying and unstoppable. Even his diamond body could not withstand it, and his heart was pierced. In the end, he did not expect that it would allow him to cultivate the 3rd level of the mixed Yuan demon body, heart of heavenly Sunday, Een talisman yang fire, uprooting the heavens to enter the moon cave, breaking through the chaos to pick up millet pearls, using Yin and Yang and the 5 elements to create all things. Qi is the spirit of all things, beginning with it and end with it. There is no golden liquid Huandan Dao. If one wishes to cultivate the great Tao of Heavenly Sun, one must abandon yin and yang. If one obtains it, one will enter the Tao of life, and if one loses it, one will enter the Tao of death. If one obtains it, one will enter the Tao of life, and if one loses it, one will enter the Tao of death. If one obtains it, one will escape the cycle of reincarnation, and one will enter the Saint Foundation. Cultivating the heart of Heavenly Sun was extremely dangerous. If one failed, one would immediately suffer a calamity. But if one succeeded, one would enter the Tao of life, and enter the Saint Foundation. Su-yi had always had the cultivation method of the third level of the mixed Yuan demon body, heart of Heavenly Sunday. Ever since he cultivated the mixed Yuan demon body, Su-yi wanted to cultivate the third level of the heart of Heavenly Sunday. However, he did not know much about it. Time was short and it was extremely dangerous. He did not expect that by coincidence, Yunling Feng's sword would allow him to escape death and cultivate the heart of Heavenly Sunday. Su-yi recalled that when the Divine Sword Valley collapsed, everything was destroyed. His vitality was lost, but his soul seemed to be indestructible. In the end, his body seemed to be filled with a mysterious vitality that allowed him to recover, as if he was reborn. After that, there was movement in the mysterious space, allowing him to cultivate the heart of Heavenly Sunday. In the process, there was even that mysterious vitality helping him. In other words, if it was not for that mysterious vitality, everything would still be unknown. There seems to be someone. The voice seems very familiar, Sui muttered to himself. During this period of time, he seemed to have heard a familiar voice. There seemed to be other people in this strange place. Sui raised his eyes and looked around the strange dark space. It was hazy and there was no existence at all. However, the broken sword and a few spatial bags fell not far away. Is there anyone? Can you hear me? Sui opened his mouth and asked. Unfortunately, no one responded. Did I hear wrongly? Sui muttered to himself. Kid, do you look good naked? Chapter 595. The voice was sweet and clear. When it landed in Su-yi's ears, it was as if it was directly transmitted into his mind. Who is it? Sui immediately raised his eyes and scanned the surroundings. His soul power probed the surroundings. This voice gave Sui a sense of familiarity. However, when Sui looked around, he found nothing. He did not see anyone. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. The sweet and faint voice continued to land in Su-yi's ears. You are, Sui was shocked. This voice was indeed very familiar. You are the 9 Lives Cat Demon, suddenly, Sui remembered. He was shocked and almost jumped up. He shouted, Is it you? You're not dead? Are you looking forward to my death? The faint voice had a bit of sharpness, but it was undoubtedly the voice of the 9 Lives Cat Demon. 9 Lives Cat Demon, you're still alive. That's great. Bien, Sui was pleasantly surprised. He immediately jumped down from the ancient stone platform. Only then did he realize that he was really naked. His face was slightly flushed. Sui immediately picked up a few space bags not far from him. He took out a set of robes and put them on. His heart was immersed in excitement. The 9 Lives Cat Demon was not dead. This made Sui happy from the bottom of his heart. He originally thought that the 9 Lives Cat Demon had been destroyed after the demon core exploded. Now that the 9 Lives Cat Demon was still alive, Sui was very happy. Of course I'm still alive. The 9 Lives Cat Demon said faintly, Also, I have a name. You have a name, but you have never said it. I don't know, Sui curled his lips. They had spent some time together, but he did not know the name of the 9 Lives Cat Demon. Ling Qianxue. The voice was faint. Ling Qianxue. That's a nice name. Where are you now? Sui was puzzled. He could only hear the voice but not see the person. I'm in your body. Ling Qianxue's voice rang in Su-yi's ears. Inside my body. Su-yi was dumbfounded. He checked his body in shock and said, "You're in my body? Where are you? How come I don't know? You're not lying to me, are you? Didn't you explode your Yaodan? What happened?" Su-yi was surprised and puzzled by the series of questions. "If the demonic pill explodes, I will definitely die. However, within my clan, there is a kind of innate secret technique that is somewhat similar to the Phoenix clan's Nirvana rebirth technique. It allows me to borrow a body to be reborn," Ling Qianxue said. "Is that so? You borrowed my body to be reborn." Suddenly, Su-yi thought of an extremely sinister method. It was rumored that there were experts in this world who were able to separate their soul from their physical body and take over another person's body before encountering a calamity. Thinking of this, Su-yi's eyes suddenly turned. He said, "Borrowing my body to be reborn? You're not thinking of taking over my body, are you? Even if I want to take over your body, you're not qualified. My clan's innate secret technique of borrowing someone's body to be reborn is not something that can be taken over," Ling Qianxue said to Su-yi with some disdain in her voice. "That's good." Su-yi heaved a sigh of relief and asked, "Then, are you really in my body now? Do I have any other choice? After the demonic pill explodes, I can only borrow your body to be reborn," Ling Qianxue said. "So, you've always been in my body?" Su-yi was surprised. He didn't feel anything at all. "I'm in your body. Strictly speaking, I'm in your flesh and bones. I'm one with you. However, it's not easy to be reborn completely." Ling Qianxue's voice was slightly serious. "You're one with me." Su-yi raised his eyebrows. "Don't think that I've taken advantage of you. If I hadn't helped you this time, I'm afraid you wouldn't have been able to survive," Ling Qianxue said. "So, it's you." Only then did Su-yi understand that the mysterious life energy in his dazed state came from Ling Qianxue. He said, "Thank you." Su-yi was very sincere in this gratitude. If it wasn't for Ling Qianxue's demonic pill exploding, he would have died in the hands of the blazing dragon emperor. This time, it was Ling Qianxue who helped him secretly. Su-yi knew that the seemingly cold and arrogant girl wasn't that difficult to get along with after they got familiar with each other. "No need to thank me. You don't owe me," Ling Qianxue said. Only she knew what kind of benefits she had obtained from this brat when she borrowed his body to be reborn. That kind of energy had benefited her greatly. It was unimaginable. "Of course I owe you. You've already saved me several times," Su-yi said with a smile. "You really don't owe me anything," Ling Qianxue said with a helpless voice. She couldn't possibly say that she had also obtained unimaginable benefits from this brat. Su-yi smiled and didn't say much. He asked Ling Qianxue, "You just said that it's not easy to be reborn completely. Do you need my help?" Su-yi thought. Ling Qianxue had helped him before. If he could help her to be reborn completely, it could be considered as repaying some of her help. With your current strength, forget it. You can't help at all. Ling Qianxue's voice was faint. She said, "But you have to remember, you can't die so casually. I borrowed your body to be reborn. If you die, I can't stay out of it. So, if you really want to help, then live well." This was an accident. Su-yi was embarrassed. There was a bitter smile on his face. This time, Yunling Feng had taken advantage of the opportunity. He could only blame himself for being too careless. The demonic qi in the divine weapon was too terrifying. As for Yunling Feng, Su-yi thought in his heart. A chill flashed across his eyes. This debt would be settled properly when the time came. Where is this place? How do I get out? A practical question was placed in front of him. Su-yi had searched around this strange void. There was no exit. It was eerily silent. After you were injured, this place collapsed. Then we arrived here. This place is very mysterious. It's not ordinary, Ling Qianxue said. Then, do you know Su Tian? Kaka Sui sighed. He could only slowly think of a way to get out. Then, He wanted to ask Ling Qianxue if she knew about Su Diang's situation. Suddenly, there was a cracking sound in this space. Light began to spread out. Following the aura and movement, Su Yi's gaze fell on the quaint stone platform where he was originally sitting cross-legged. That quaint stone platform was originally the place where the divine weapon left behind by the old ancestor of Xinjian Gate was stored. At this moment, the cracked stone platform fluctuated again. Suddenly, there was a dazzling light that spread out. Boom! This strange void trembled. The light gradually filled the sky. The mysterious runes and symbols on the quaint stone platform fluctuated continuously, emitting dazzling light. The cracks became bigger and bigger. Buzz. Chapter 596. What's going on? Looking at the quaint stone platform, Su Yi was shocked. He could feel an increasingly terrifying aura. From the cracked quaint stone platform, a terrifying aura gushed out like a volcano that was about to erupt. Buzz. With a trembling sound, the wind and thunder clanged. The cracked quaint stone platform was completely shattered, as if it had exploded. But at the same time, a ball of light bloomed from the quaint stone platform. It was like a dragon emerging from the clouds and a phoenix dancing in the 9 heavens. The light was so dazzling that one couldn't see anything. The dazzling light was like a galaxy falling with a sacred aura. Buzz. In Su Yi's hand, the broken sword seemed to have sensed something. It kept vibrating, as if it was about to awaken something. Su Yi was on high alert. He looked at the dazzling light. It was a saber. It was a huge saber that was purplish gold. The hilt was engraved with mysterious runes that looked like the movement of stars. On the blade, runes were engraved. The blade of the saber was like a 1,000 feet tall wall. It gave off a majestic and intimidating aura, agile, domineering, and sharp. The saber was shining with divine light. Divine weapon. Ling Qianxue's shocked voice came out from her mouth. Divine weapon. Su Yi was shocked. Wasn't the divine weapon left behind by the Laozu of Xinjian Gate taken by Yunlingfeng? Moreover, it was a saber. The one left behind by the Laozu of Xinjian Gate should also be a sword. The divine weapon was suspended in mid-air, releasing dazzling light. The constellations on the blade were revolving, illuminating the strange void as if a galaxy was falling. The sacred aura fluctuated as if it came from ancient times. The quaint and vast aura made Su Yi feel that it was definitely not inferior to the divine weapon that Yunlingfeng had. Looks like you're really lucky. This saber is a treasure. Ling Qianxue's voice was filled with unconcealable shock. This was no ordinary treasure. The divine weapon has a spirit. Let's see if there's an opportunity. Su Yi's lips curled into a smile. This was a divine weapon, and he couldn't miss it. Su Yi wanted to give it a try. As for whether or not he had the luck to do so, that would have to wait until he tried. Su Yi was very careful with his soul fluctuations. After the lesson from that sword, Su Yi had no choice but to be even more careful. Su Yi carefully released a strand of soul energy from his forehead. He focused all his attention and waited, trying to touch that saber. Whoosh! When a wisp of Su Yi's soul strength came into contact with the large saber, a resplendent saber light shot towards Su Yi like a bolt of lightning. A vast aura seemed to have solidified this strange space, causing Su Yi to be greatly alarmed. However, he was unable to move at all. Before he could regain his senses, the saber light had already arrived in front of Su Yi's eyes. The saber light rapidly enlarged in Su Yi's eyes. The dazzling light made Su Yi unable to look straight at it. His eyes were tightly shut, and the yuan qi in his body was fully activated. However, it was completely suppressed, and he couldn't move at all. %% more s news fastest. Qi. The saber light shot through his forehead, and a vast aura drilled into Su Yi's mind. Boom! In Su Yi's mind, there seemed to be some movement in the mysterious space. However, it was only for an instant. The mysterious space calmed down once again, and there were no more movements. A terrifying aura rushed into Su Yi's mind. It was vast and boundless, simple and sacred. Su Yi's mind was dizzy, and he was about to faint. Under this vast aura, it was as if his mind was about to burst open, and his soul was about to be destroyed. A dazzling light spread out in Su Yi's mind. The light was so bright that it was as if a galaxy had appeared. Within the galaxy, the constellations revolved, and the aura was vast and mysterious. It was incomparably sacred. Junior of my gate, I am comforted by your presence. An old and melodious voice sounded, as if it had traveled through time and space. At the same time, an illusory figure spread out from the dazzling light. This illusory figure was majestic, and his body was tall and straight. However, it was rather hazy, and one couldn't see his true appearance. The voice continued to spread in Su Yi's mind, saying, I started practicing martial arts at the age of 3, swordsmanship at the age of 5, invincible among my peers at the age of 13, comprehended swordsmanship at the age of 15, dominated the continent at the age of 30, and stepped into the ranks of the top experts in the world at the age of 40. I single-handedly created the Xin Jian Gate. Su Yi was shocked, and his heart trembled. Could this figure be the ancestor of the Xin Jian Gate? I have been practicing swordsmanship all my life, and I am obsessed with it. My swordsmanship is endless, but I am too stubborn. I have fallen into the devil sword Tao, and it is difficult for me to control myself. Once I completely fall into the devil sword Tao, there are few who can stop me. At that time, the people will be plunged into misery and suffering because of me. I have no choice but to switch to the sword technique, hoping to suppress the sword with the saber. Unintentionally, I obtained a meteorite from outer space. I went to the sacred mountain to find natural treasures, and I forged it with the meteorite to make a saber and a sword. The sword was called Red Dragon Godly Steps, and it was mostly based on divine gold and guided by the essence and blood of the Dragon Clan. The saber was called Starry Sky, and it was mostly based on meteorite and guided by the essence and blood of the Dragon Clan. I blocked it and could no longer suppress the Devil Sword Tao. I was afraid that I would fall into the Devil Sword Tao, but I couldn't bear to destroy my own sword Tao, so I sealed it in the Red Dragon Godly Steps and set up this place to suppress it with the Starry Sky. I was afraid that there would be a change in the future, and the people would be plunged into misery and suffering, and blood would flow into rivers, and my sect would be destroyed. The people in my sect were about to die, so I entered this place to help suppress it, but in the end, this day still came. The old voice came out, but it made Su Yi's heart beat wildly, and he was shocked. It seemed that this shadow was really left by the old ancestor of Xin Jian Gate. The Red Dragon Godly Steps can no longer be suppressed, and the Starry Sky is about to come out. You have obtained my Starry Sky, and it is enough to show that your talent is stronger than the Red Dragon Godly Step. Otherwise, you would have been affected by the Red Dragon Godly Step. I have studied the saber technique for half of my life, and it is difficult for me to surpass the sword Tao. I can only teach you the basic saber technique, and my sect's disciples should comprehend it by themselves, and take responsibility to suppress the Red Dragon Godly Step. Take back the Red Dragon Godly Steps, but the Devil Sword is 10, and everything depends on the will of heaven. Walala, when the voice disappeared, the shadow also disappeared from his mind. The remaining Starry Sky was left in Su Yi's mind, emitting a faint light and a message. After Su Yi verified it, he found that the message left was the foundation of saber, which was almost the same as the foundation of sword of Xin Jian Gate. For a moment, Su Yi couldn't help but feel shocked, and his heart fluctuated. After being in a daze for a while, Su Yi came back to his senses. He exhaled a long breath, and then the corner of his mouth raised a helpless smile. He seemed to be a little dumbfounded and murmured, Old ancestor, are you playing with me? Chapter 597. Senior Ancestor, I'm not afraid of you hurting me. I'm willing to. Su Yi's face was dejected. It was the inheritance of the divine sword sex ancestor. From the message left behind, the ancestor had spent half of his life comprehending blade skills, but it was difficult for him to surpass the way of the sword. They were evenly matched. This meant that the divine sword sex ancestor's achievement in blade skills was definitely not below the way of the sword. They were evenly matched. Zero. The Xinjiang Gates ancestor deliberately did not leave behind such an inheritance, which made Su Yi a little depressed. However, Su Yi did not struggle. After all, he had survived this disaster and obtained the Starry Sky Soul. Such an opportunity would not be lower than Yun Lingfeng's divine red dragon. Su Yi was satisfied. Su Yi was also dumbfounded about the life of the Xinjiang Gates ancestor from his own account. He was obsessed with swordsmanship his whole life. He started practicing martial arts at the age of 3, practiced swordsmanship at the age of 5, and was invincible among his peers at the age of 13. He comprehended swordsmanship at the age of 15, dominated the continent at the age of 30, and was among the top experts in the world at the age of 40. At the same time, he founded the Xinjiang Gate, which was still standing in Zhongzhou. After that, he became obsessed with swordsmanship and switched to saber skills. His achievements were not lower than swordsmanship. When he refined the divine red dragon and starry sky soul, he actually attracted a tribulation. This was enough to prove the level of the divine red dragon and starry sky soul. This was a divine weapon that could attract a tribulation. In the end, the Xinjiang Gates ancestor blocked the tribulation. The simple words, "I blocked it," made Su Yi not difficult to imagine the danger and aggressiveness. Su Yi had withstood the tribulation personally, so he naturally knew how dangerous it was. After the divine red dragon and starry sky soul were completed, the Xinjiang Gates ancestor could no longer suppress the evil swordsmanship. He was afraid of falling into evil, but he could not bear to destroy his own swordsmanship. In the end, he sealed his swordsmanship inheritance into the divine red dragon and set up the divine sword valley, which was suppressed by the starry sky soul. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.